All right, what is going on out there, podcast family? I trust everybody is safe, happy, and well. And thank you once again for stopping by and checking out another episode of the Hook It podcast. Today, I am joined by the legend and my buddy, Matt Macduff. Kind of. And the reason I say kind of is because this audio file was originally just going to go on Matt's platform, the Matt Macduff Show, which if you don't subscribe, head over and do it right now. Do yourself a favor. But as this conversation unfolded and ideas started to flow, we decided that we'd both share this audio file and then also try and get listeners involved too. So a little bit of the backstory with this. Matt first came on my podcast back in November 2018. And since then, like many of the guests, Matt and I have stayed in touch. We've actually become quite good friends because we share a lot of the same interests, especially when it comes to health, wellness, mental health, etc. So we often send each other book recommendations and podcast recommendations. But a month or so ago, I sent Matt a book to read. He read it and straight away wanted to sit down and talk about the book. So we decided that why not make it into a podcast? Like I said, this was originally just going to go on Matt's platform. We've decided to share the audio file. So a lot of what's in this podcast is a little bit about me too. Not the movement, me. So I don't want anyone to think that this is narcissistic or anything like that. Like I said, initially we thought this was just going to go on Matt's platform, but there's a lot of stuff in here that I've personally never really spoken about, especially when it's about my own mental health and the growth of the podcast and business and stuff like that. And I just wanted to throw that in there because I don't want anyone to think that this is a sort of one-sided conversation, especially for the first portion of it. Again, there's a lot of stuff in here I've never really spoken about. I wanted to be very honest, open and transparent. It left me in a bit of a head haze afterwards because some of this stuff isn't easy to talk about, but hopefully you guys have some takeaways from this episode and you enjoy it as much as I did sitting and chatting with Matt. Like I say, if you guys enjoy this episode and this sort of concept, we are going to do it more often. So there's a book recommendation at the end of this podcast. If you want to get involved, either get the audio book or buy the physical copy. And then in a month or so, Matt and I are going to sit down and have a very probably similar conversation about the book, what we've learned and some of the takeaways from it. But before we drop in on this episode, as usual, we want to say a quick thank you to some of the people who help keep the lights on, keep airing the tires, and keep this podcast moving forward. First up, Natural Leaf CBD. Unfortunately, the CBD industry is full of cowboys, people who are just trying to make a quick buck, but Natural Leaf CBD are in it for the right reasons. Natural Leaf CBD is a family-run business based in Cheshire in the UK, and they are in this market, like I said, for the right reasons. Unlike all the petrol stations, vape shops, car washes, animal sanctuaries, all those places that want to sell you CBD, these guys know what they are doing and they make rad products. I thought I'd give you a bit of my own sort of experience with CBD. I currently use 3 Natural Leaf products. I use their tincture, so a 5 or 10% CBD sort of bottle, which you put 3 drops underneath your tongue. First up in the day, I do that after I've brushed my teeth, so 3 drops just underneath the tongue. I then use the MCT oil too in my coffee when I make that. So already you're 6 drops in. The day's only just getting started, but the party's started, you know. And then a little pro tip for you, which I've discovered. Before bed, as usual, I do another 3 drops of the 5 or 10% CBD, but I also use their skin balm. I put this on my eyes. It's really soothing, super soft. It spreads really well. A little bottle lasts me a good 3 to 4 months. And then any sore points I have on my body, whether it's from a ride or a workout or whatever, I put a little bit of CBD on there too. And it's just magical stuff. This stuff's sent from heaven, I think. All Natural Leaf products are available over on their website, naturalleaf.co.uk. Of course, they're organic. They are pesticide and fertilizer free. They're 100% recyclable and a guaranteed strength, which means what it says on the product is exactly what you're going to be putting inside your body. The guys over at Natural Leaf have been kind enough to give you you listeners a discount. So if you enter promo code HKTPod10, you can get 10% off anything and anything on the store. We're also brought to you by Works and their Hydro Shot Pressure Washer. I've said it before, I'll say it again. This thing is a life changer. It has helped me no end. Like many people, I have to keep my bike inside of my house. So it's good when you get back after a ride, especially coming into winter in the UK, to be able to wash the bike, let it dry naturally, or use a sort of air pressure or something like that. And then the bike can go upstairs. No damaged carpets, no damages on me from my girlfriend getting upset and throwing jabs. I mean, if you really think about it, you wouldn't put your clothes away dirty. You wouldn't put dishes back in the cupboard dirty. So you should wash your bike away. You should wash your bike before you put it away. There's nothing worse than getting on a bike that's been caked in mud for weeks and it's been sat in the garage. The chain's all creaky. The brakes don't work. Come on, we're better than that. We're better than that. The HydroShot uses a super unique battery, which means you don't need mains, you don't need anything like that. You can just slide the battery in, and wherever you are, if you're at the trail, if you're at the bottom of a downhill run, if you're in the middle of the woods, you're on the moon, you can wash your bike. The HydroShot is available to buy from select retailers only. Amazon, Argos, Halfords, Toolstation, their official eBay store, or check out their new website, works-uk.com. That's worx-uk.com. And last but not least, we're brought to you by hookitproducts.co.uk. And we just got a ton of brake pads in stock. And our little tagline for brake pads is brake pads that don't break the bank. Brake pads start at just £6.99, which again, coming into winter, load up on brake pads, folks. Make sure you've got stopping power. Our stuff is legit. It works. It's cheap. It's affordable, but it's really bloody good quality too. Enter the promo code podcast on hookitproducts.co.uk. You'll get 10% off anything and everything on the store too. So no matter what brakes you've got, Saint, XTR, XT, Hope, Campagnolia, or whatever it is, whatever brakes you've got, Avid, SRAM, Elixir, doesn't matter. Whatever they are, we've got a pad in stock. $6.99, 10% off, hookitproducts.co.uk. And that is it from me. Long intros today, folks. I'm really sorry, but I hope you guys enjoy this very wide-ranging, very open, very transparent from both ends episode of this podcast. So without further ado, let's hand over to Matt Macduff and I. Enjoy.
Welcome to the Hook It podcast, endorsed by @OW_23. Add me, tag me, follow me. Please follow me.
All right.
Oh, we nailed that one.
I think we did. Dropping in. Take 6.
All right, dude. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Matt. Really, really grateful to be on here chatting to you again. Like I said before, we've had a few screw-ups on this audio already, but anytime I get to sit and chat to you, it's an absolute pleasure, dude. You're an inspiration on the bike and off the bike. So, yeah, to be able to just sit and riff and just see where this thing goes, I think it's going to be fun. And I'm looking forward to it, man. And I'm even more looking forward to it now that we can't see each other, because I have no idea what you're doing, if you're even there, if it's going to work. So let's see how this thing goes.
Yeah, you're not used to recording just audio, eh? You usually turn the videos on.
Yeah, I think one thing I've learned on this whole podcast journey is that the video does help, because you can see a little bit of body language. Obviously, the best way of doing these things is to sit in person across a table from each other, right? But if we don't have that, the next best thing is to sit on Skype across from each other and be able to see each other. But if you don't have that, then we're going to go old school, aren't we? And just listen to each other's voices and just hope for the best. I think that's where we're at right now.
Totally, and that's funny, because I've been going for the best. I haven't been able to turn any of the videos on because my internet connection, I'm always worried about it. So I'm totally used to doing it old school, but maybe I gotta step up the game and turn the video on. And you're right, it'll just make the podcast better because then you got like body language.
Yeah, I think I've noticed too that although like the YouTube views for my stuff isn't huge, people do seem to want to sit and watch the whole thing, even if there's not a great deal happening on the screen. I know, I'm a bit of a geek like that. I'll sit and watch podcasts in the evening rather than watching TV. And I just think it's just that tiny little bit more engaging. I think if you can see and, you know what I mean, what people are up to. So, yeah, that's the only reason I started doing it, really, dude, to be fair, was it just makes it a little bit easier to read body language. And, yeah, that's pretty much the reason. But, yeah, old school, man. Old school, I like it.
Yeah, that's interesting to me. And I guess people want to use the YouTube app. Maybe it's a little more accessible,
Definitely.
easier to use. So
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I'm kind of always a little bit surprised when, in the past, I've put up the audio versions of podcasts on YouTube, and they're not getting huge hits, but the fact that a couple of hundred people listen to it on YouTube, I thought, well, I'm gonna try and make it a little bit better by adding video to it, and it's again it's doing okay, but I think it's only hopefully going to get a little bit stronger as podcasts grow in popularity, and I get a little bit better at editing. I think that's going to be a big thing too, is like making it actually visually more appealing to people. So yeah, maybe you should do that, man. I don't know if you do it already, but putting them up on YouTube, even if it's just the audio, I think is it's pretty critical, I think, right now.
dude, I thank you for the recommendation. I definitely thought about it, and I definitely see that's where my podcast is going to, where the show is going. But I feel like right now I'm really in the infant stages of my podcasting career, and I just my focus is just like making sure they come out every 2 weeks, and then as the podcast builds and there's more momentum, then I'll start adding on, production value as it, it grows slowly.
Yeah.
And I think that's a wonderful idea, and YouTube could be a great asset for the podcast for sure.
Yeah, I think so, man. So what are you now? You're like 7 or 8 episodes in, is that right?
Dude, 13. This will be
sorry.
13.
Okay, wow. Jeez. All right. Okay.
No, dude, it's all good, man.
Wow.
I mean,
That's
like
gone fast.
nothing compared to your show. I saw you past 100 there not too long ago. And
yeah.
Congratulations, by the way.
Thank you. Appreciate it, man. I mean, again, it's a time thing, isn't it? I've been doing this thing a little bit longer than you, but finally you came to the party. You're long overdue, but you got there in the end. It's funny because we were talking about this on the first recording, which we definitely lost. That obviously continuing to press you into doing this podcast is hopefully, I feel like slightly bit responsible for it being out in the world. But it's just a shame, man, that you missed out on a good. I don't know. I'd say, when did we do our first episode? Was it maybe? It's got to be like 2.5 years ago now.
Yeah, it was about
right?
2.5 years ago, and dude, it's my turn to thank you. Thank you so much for pushing me into the podcast game. I was thinking about it for probably about 3 years before I pulled the trigger, and
wow.
And I just wasn't ready, man.
Yeah,
just needed to grow a little bit more, and I guess you're never really ready.
True, that's very true.
But at one point, you just got to put the boots on, man, and get after it.
It's a pretty big thing too, isn't it? I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on this and how you found that journey of putting yourself out there, because especially with some of the stuff you've done, you've been very open about. The last episode I listened to was the solo cast you did, where you talked about some of the lessons you've learned after doing the loop or not doing the loop, whichever way you want to look at it. Mm-hmm. And I remember listening to that, and it was only a few days ago, but thinking like, that takes balls to sit and talk on your own for 30 minutes. You know, I've done one of those episodes myself, and it was one of the hardest things because you're constantly in your own head. Like, you literally, there's nobody to bounce off, and you're just riffing. And I'd be curious, man, like, how did you find that? And how have you found the whole experience of putting yourself out there into the world?
Honestly, it feels great, man. You have all this stuff inside of you, and you're scared to let it out. You're worried about what people will think of you, and you're worried about how your friends will view it, and your family, whatever. But at least for me, that's how I felt. Just scared, about what other people would think of me. But at the end of the day, like, I really realized that the more vulnerable and transparent that I am with my struggle and my journey, the stronger I am, and the more I can walk freely on the planet and be me and be my true authentic self. So it's just like, it's like a two-step process. One, it helps me live a better, more authentic life because I'm being completely transparent and open with the world, which feels amazing. There's nothing to hide. And two, I get to feel even better because I'm helping people by sharing my experience. And not a lot of people have been in the situations that I have been in, and there are people out there that's going through similar things, like, really closely. So if I can just share a little bit of wisdom, then it could maybe help them walk, the path a little better and make less mistakes, and hopefully, not get hurt, just keep safe, and because life is long, and you need your body the whole way.
Totally. That's such an interesting observation, though, that's the way you look at it, and the one thing that sprung to mind straight away then is I like to think of, especially certain podcasts, it's almost like a bookshelf, and you can listen to something, and someone might listen to that, the talk about the things that you learn from the loop, for example, and a lot of the stuff you talked about was really deep, man, and really, really insightful too, about basically feeling like you had to you weren't ready to do that stunt, like you wanted to grow more. And the interesting thing about podcasts, I find, is that someone might listen to that, like me, a few days ago, but then that little bit of insight, that one little takeaway, will stick with them for the rest of their life, potentially. And there might be a time where they think, oh fuck, like, I remember that podcast, and they'll go back, and it could be in 2 weeks, it could be in 2 years, 20 years. And I find that so interesting that that's what podcasts are becoming now. It's almost like a free education. It's almost like going to university. And that's what I always think about, especially when you do a more deep episode, that's not just playing around. You talk a little bit more openly about maybe struggles mentally or physically or whatever, that it could actually literally change somebody's life. And that's a really crazy thing, right? And that's why I was curious how you found that whole thing of putting yourself out there. That's why. And to sort of relate that back to myself a little bit, I've been really overwhelmed over the years by the amounts of messages that you get, and people say, I listened to this episode and I got this takeaway from it. And it's something that I never, ever expected to happen from this whole journey. I never would think that someone would listen to something like what I've got to say, or a recommendation, or a product, or I never expected that.
Yeah, so how I'm interested to hear how you've been dealing with that, and maybe what got you into podcasting, and some of the struggles that you faced along the way, because it could really help me with my path.
Yeah. I mean, I probably unpack it a little bit and start just for some sort of context, around how the podcast started. So I'll go back a little bit, and I'm sorry for people who might have already heard this story if you're listening. I was a pretty weird child, I'll be honest with you, and even from a really young age, I was really obsessed with brands and marketing. and sort of two-wheel sport, basically. I was an obsessed little kid. I don't know if I had any sort of an OCD or AD. I don't know. I don't know about any of those terms, but I was really, really obsessed with things, and I used to study magazines. And so from a very early age, I was very drawn towards action sports and in particular two-wheeled sport. You know, I'm from a motorsport background. My dad's always been into motorcycles. My uncle raced speedway. You know, I grew up with a couple of really close cousins of mine who were into motocross as well. So I just became like super obsessed with getting motocross magazines and studying them. And as I got a little bit older, I guess I kind of already realized at quite a young age that, you know, I wasn't probably going to make the riding side of it a career, but there was other avenues within action sports where you could make a career. And around that sort of time, I got really, like I say, obsessed with brands. And I mean, this is how creepy I was, dude, right? I used to have my mobile phone was filled with phone numbers for brands. So I barely had any friends. So I'd have like the phone number for No Fear, and I'd just call them. And I probably wouldn't even speak to people. I'd just call them because I was just blown away that you could call this cool company. You know, how sad is that when you really reflect back on it? It was a very sort of strange.
I think it's awesome.
Yeah, but I was just obsessed with adverts in magazines and what rider was wearing what clothing, or you know, what brands they were involved in and stuff. So then, like I say, I got a little bit older and I realized that I couldn't make this thing the actual riding side of it probably wasn't going to make it a job. I was a pretty good motocross rider growing up, you know, raced amateur stuff, dipped my toe in a few pro races, moved over to the States when I was 16. I left school at 16 because you can do that over here. I'm not sure if you can do that in Canada where you're at, but here you can just dip out of school at 16. And I wasn't and I'm not very academic, as people are going to find out as we go throughout this conversation that I'm really, really not very smart. So I just wanted to dip out of education, really. I was pretty much sick of going to school.
So
I just wanted to.
Could I just ask a quick question? Can you still go to university? If you
no,
dip
I'd have to go and get A levels, I guess. We have like GCSEs. This is how stupid I am. I actually don't know. I don't think I can go to university. I think first I'd have to get my A levels, which because I'm over a certain age now, I'd have to pay for, and then I could go to university, I think. But the chances of me going to university, like, there's more chance of me racing Anaheim 1 next year. Do you know what I mean? It's not it's not even in my it's not gonna happen, man. Let's be brutally honest. So moved away at 16 and started looking at ways where I could sort of make a bit of a career out of action sports and in particular motocross. Trying to think. So left school, moved to America, spent some time there, sort of riding motocross and working at a really, really cool place called MX Heaven, where people used to come and basically go on holiday in California, and I'd take them around and take them to the local tracks, take them to the cool brands like Troy Lee Designs and at the time No Fear and places like that. And it was like a bit of a really eye-opening experience, you know, meeting people and getting to see how that side of the industry works. 'Cause it was my first time that I'd really, you know, been to a warehouse where they did distribution, and it was kind of fascinating to me. So fast forward a few years, I ended up staying in the States for about 4.5-5 years, and then came home and started working for a motocross brand called One Industries, with the objective of sort of, again, learning how distribution works. And did that for a few years. Basically, I looked after like the north part of the UK sales. So I was driving around, you know, visiting motorcycle stores and also some bike stores too, selling motocross clothing and sort of graphics for bikes and stuff like that. Then I somehow ended up starting a business making camper vans. So you know, like the vans that people used. Yeah. So this is a bit of a wild story, man, and we could riff on this for hours. But I basically was at One Industries, and and it was a really cool job when I first started. My job was basically to go around shops, drink coffee, and chat about the sport that I love. I mean, at 20 years old, I couldn't have wished for a better job. Like, they gave me a brand new car to drive, a really good salary. You know, I was living with some friends, partying probably way too much, and sort of just getting to know people in the industry. For a sales rep, I was super young too. Like, all the other people who worked for brands were 35 years of age plus, and I was, I think, like 22 or something, 21, 22 or something like that. And I had this really good job, and basically it became like really corporate all of a sudden. One industries went through this like takeover where they got bought out, and all of a sudden it went from being a sort of like really chilled out, nice job to being very sales driven, and that's just not me at all. You know, I'm not a pushy guy when it comes to sales. I just sort of like to represent the brand real good, and just, you know, be that sort of a friendly guy and just chat to people. That's pretty much my vibe when it comes to the sales side of things. And then, so yeah, it became really corporate. And I remember just thinking, I need to get out of this. Like, I don't like being driven by targets. It's just not me. It's making me into a not a very nice person. You know, I'm always thinking about money. I'm always thinking about if I'm going to lose my job if I don't hit a certain target. And then the opportunity to start this business making camper vans came around. And it was a really wild concept that me and my cousin came up with. Basically, my cousin was involved with Speedway, and all of the Speedway riders in Europe went to one place to get their vans converted into, you know, you take like a regular Mercedes Sprinter, and then you put a garage in the back and a bit of a living area and stuff. So we decided that we'd buy a van and we'd take it out to Poland, which is where this company was, and we'd basically start going back and forth, you know, bring the van back, sell it in the UK, which we did. And then I'll fast forward real quick, and we, you know, by all means we can go back to that. But basically this business became pretty damn big in quite a short space of time. So we went from doing, you know, selling one van every 2 months to selling 8 to 10 vans every month.
Oh my
and
goodness.
It was honestly, dude, like for two young guys who both dipped out of school at 16, you know, all of a sudden we had this multi-million-pound business, and we were 24 years old, like, and had no idea what we were really doing. But we basically created this bit of a monster where most of the stuff we sold was in Sweden, Norway, and sometimes places like Russia and Finland.
Okay.
But we were having the vans made in Poland, but we also sold vans in England. So we had this epic driving triangle of going, you know, England to Poland, Poland to Sweden, then drive from Sweden back to Poland. And then it went on like this for best part of 4 years, I think. Yeah, 3 or 4 years. And basically I was just super unhappy, man. I was, you know, I wasn't ever at home, so I didn't get to see my family because I was always away driving. I was, you know, getting into relationships here with girls that they'd then be like, you know, I'd tell them I'm going away for a week, and then I'd be away for 3 months and just never be able to get back because I'd just get stuck in a country.
Yeah, that didn't go well, I assume.
It didn't go well at all. And again, like me and my cousin, we were butting heads. He was loving it. He was loving the travel. He was loving the money and all this sort of stuff. And I was just really depressed. Like, you know, clinically probably depressed, where I didn't want to do it at all. But I was stuck in this bubble where I couldn't get out. And I remember one day I was driving in Poland. I remember it clear as day. And I was listening to a podcast, and it was a Joe Rogan episode with Duncan Trussell. And they were talking, and I'd only just really got into podcasts, but they were talking about basically doing what you love. And if you don't enjoy it, don't do it, because life's too short and you never know when it might end. And this episode just, dude, it just hit a nerve. And the next day I sat down with my cousin and I said, look, I'm out. I can't do this anymore. You know, I'm miserable. I'm, you know, all right, we're doing all right financially, but it's not what it's about for me at all. I'm all about family and friends. You know, I want to be home, and I'm just not into it anymore. So I came home.
That must have been a big moment right there.
It was huge, actually. It was really big because we committed, you know, 3.5 years of our life to this. and it was at a point where it was doing it was doing really well. So I ended up walking away from the business.
Must have felt like you were just like your friends must have been like, hey, what are you doing? Like
all the
walking away
time.
from this awesome business.
Yeah, but also all the time, as in like, friends' birthdays. Oh, where are you? And I'd be like, yeah, I'll be here, and then you don't turn up to the party because you're in Sweden or Norway or something, and you've all had to go out there to sort a problem out. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It looks great from the outside at the time, I think, but when you live in it, and a lot of people listen to this who are maybe professional athletes, and maybe yourself will know that travel's great, but it can become kind of tedious living out of a bag for extended periods of time.
Yeah, it can be hard on you for sure.
Yeah, and I think I was just worn out as well, dude. I mean, we didn't stop. We couldn't physically put the brakes on this thing because it was every time we'd get an inquiry, we'd take on the job. We were never stopping. So yeah, I just decided that one day I was like, that's it. I'm done. I'm out. I'm gonna call it.
How long ago was that?
It'll have been like 6 years now, I think. Yeah, about 6 years or something. I always get muddled up with dates and time, so people probably listen to this going like, so that means you're 50 years old? No. So it was around, it's around 6 years ago now. It must have been, because we've had Hook It for around 6 years. So it will have been about 6 years ago. My cousin's carried on with the business. It's still doing really good. But we had some issues after I left the company, basically, that I ended up walking away with pretty much nothing. It caused a massive family argument. I say argument, it just caused a bit of a divide in the family, as it would do. But yeah, I ended up walking away after 3.5 years with about, God, I always forget the number, but around £70 in my bank account, I think, at the time. Which was a challenge. Let's just put it that way, right? It was a big challenge. But I already had this idea of starting a distribution company. It's what I've always loved. I felt like I'd just fallen into the trap of doing something which I wasn't really that interested in. So I'd already been talking to Cam Zink actually about Census grips, and we were emailing back and forth, and I was saying, look, I've got this idea to do it, start a distribution company in the UK. Could I get Census for the UK? And he was really open to the idea. So basically, I quit the camper van thing. I flew home. The next day after that, I started a distribution company and placed an order with Census the day after that, I think. And Cam and Howie were super kind to me. They gave me net 30 days on the first order, which means I didn't have to pay for anything up front, which was a blessing because I had literally no money. And that's how Hook It was born. Since then, I've got a couple of business partners now who sort of aren't as public as me. They like to keep themselves to themselves a little bit. And the business has grown, to distribute in different brands in the past, which we don't really do anymore now. And yeah, that's 6 years ago, which is crazy to think, but that's kind of how this whole thing started. And then, God, I'm so sorry for people listening, but then the podcast.
No, this is great. This is great stuff.
So the podcast started because I was looking at a way to market the company with zero cash. Is basically what was going on. It was like, right, we need marketing, we need to promote the brands that we're doing, but we have no money to spend on marketing. Anyone who's built a business knows that if you're going to bootstrap it and not really take on, any major investment, it's all about you sell something, you make a profit, it goes straight back into the company. So we weren't taking any wages. I moved back home with my parents. I borrowed a car off my dad, who's a car dealer, and dude literally didn't have a pot to piss in, other than a bunch of boxes full of grips in the garage at one point. So I was looking for a way of marketing the company, and I was listening to a lot of podcasts, which were really inspiring at the time, and I thought, there's not really a mountain bike podcast, so I had the idea of starting one. In between having the idea and starting it, though, I also came up with another idea to market the company, which was to try and break the world record for the world's longest jump on a mountain bike.
The
Now,
133 feet.
I think it is. Yeah, you think it is 133 feet. So I thought I have two options to market this company and get eyes on it. One is to start a podcast. The other is to try and break this world record. So initially I went for the second option, of breaking this record, right? And I'm so glad I didn't even attempt it.
Yeah. So what was the story behind that? Did you get some jumps drawn? Did you find
Everything, dude.
Location?
Yeah, the whole thing. Bike sponsor sorted. Rocky Mountain at the time were keen. Told them the idea. Put together a bit of a pitch. I had a stunt director. I had a location. A person to build the ramps. The whole thing.
Do you know the radius of the ramp that you're using?
No, mate. Honestly, right now, I couldn't tell you. I was coming at it from a point of view of like, right, I don't want to spend any money. I just want to make a cool video for YouTube, which might put some eyes on my business. Like, I wasn't really thinking straight, man. I'll be honest. Like, if I think back, I was broke. I'd just come out of a business and basically came out with nothing. I was pretty depressed still and just questioning everything. Do you know? I think I just wasn't in a good headspace looking back, and it felt like putting my life on the line to break a world record would validate this business and would validate my choice of stepping away from one into the other. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I mean, like, it sounds pretty irrational. Like,
yeah,
it's
totally irrational.
It's
totally irrational.
Working every day in a van business to like being like, I'm gonna break a world record, which is, but I admire it, man.
It's that whole thing of just going all in. You're like, right, and that's me. That's pretty much what I do. It's like if you're gonna do something, commit to it and go all in. And that was me going, right, this is how much I want this. This is how much I want this business to be a success. This is how much I want to show everyone who said this couldn't be done. I'm gonna risk everything and try this jump. But
literally everything.
Literally everything. And like the one thing that stopped this whole plan happening was almost, I had the bike sponsor lined up and been speaking to these stunt directors and stuff, but we'd never really spoken about money. And then I was chatting to this guy and he told me what he wanted for the 4 days that we'd planned. And I was like, well, that's it. I'm out. Can't do it. Podcast it is.
Yeah, I mean, like, just the ramp alone is probably like 10 to 15 grand, and then to get the dirt into place is
well, I had this there's a motocross track not far from me, and the guy who owns that was pretty keen, get some eyes on his place too. And he was like, well, I'll build you a landing out of dirt, no problem, just tell me what you want, I'll make it happen. And I was just going around it the wrong way, man. It was just like, it was a recipe for disaster, and that's, I think one of the reasons that I really vibed with your last episode was, I just wasn't ready for it, and I'm still not, and I never would be ready for anything like that. And it was a very much a messed up vision of delusion. So
wow, hey, I wouldn't go that far. Like, anything is possible,
Yeah.
If you were really, if that was something that you truly wanted to do, that's something you could do. You could jump a bike and that far when you're like 40 even. You can still do it. It's possible.
It's very true. But at the time, I wasn't geared up for that at all. I was just trying to, promote the company. So I set to starting a podcast instead.
Yeah. Have you seen the world record jump? There's like a video of it online.
Yeah, is it the guy in Wales? Nathan, Jason Rennie, not Nathan. And then Nathan Reddy gave it a go too once in the sand dunes, but there's like an official record too, and I think it's less than those two jumps because one of them didn't get validated for some reason from memory. It's a long time since I looked into this, but is there like a clip or something that you're thinking of?
Yeah, it was this German dude, and he gets towed in by a motorcycle, and he's got this metal ramp set up.
Yeah, I've definitely seen that one too, and it's 133 feet, right?
Yeah,
which is a long way, isn't it? Let's be honest. It's a big jump.
It is, but like every fest, they're getting closer and closer, to breaking that.
That is one thing that I totally agree with you on, and I think anyone who's looking, who's got the capability to do that sort of stuff, your Sam Reynolds and Nico and all those guys, it's not crazy for them, is it, to think of doing that? Let's be brutally honest here. Like for me to come off the couch, to do it it's a pretty big feat. But for those guys who are geared up for that stuff, that have got a lot of experience doing those sort of size jumps, I'm surprised nobody's had a good go at it already, if I'm honest with you. Because that record's been around for a little while from memory.
Yeah, and dude, there's a bunch of guys that got their eyes on it for sure.
Yeah.
There's at least 6 guys, I think, that want to break that record right now.
Yeah. No, I can imagine.
There's
I
a
can
lot
imagine.
of chips that got to fall into place.
Yeah.
It's a big project, and it's expensive.
Yeah, for sure, and that's obviously what I found. So basically, dude, I started the podcast instead, and thank God, really, to be honest, because this thing's been an absolute dream of a journey. I've loved every single episode that I've sat and done, and I've already got some amazing friends out of this. Obviously, you're included in that bracket for sure. I just sort of wrote off that idea of doing this long jump. It's still a bit of a joke between me and some friends and stuff that were helping me put it together. It's like, oh, are you going to do it this year and stuff? But no, definitely not. That record's definitely safe with the German guy for a little while. So yeah, like I said, that's kind of like the whole reason that the podcast started. I guess if you boil it all down without the long-winded backstory, it was to market the company in a way that was at the time really unique. I think it's done a pretty good job, if I'm honest with you. It's grown way bigger than what I ever expected it to be, and yeah, that's kind of the reason that this whole thing started. I never expected it to grow to what it has done, ever. Never once in a million years would have thought that podcasts would blow up as well at the same time, because I feel like that's kind of what happened, especially in the UK. There's been a few big media corporations that have invested really heavily in podcasts. So I think it's still on a pretty big growth trajectory, and I think we're still going to see a lot of really cool podcasts show up in our world of action sports and mountain biking. So yeah, man, I mean, that was 4.5 years ago now that I started this thing. I hope that.
Well, dude, I think we should.
In a
just
terrible
take a
way,
moment.
answered some of your questions.
Yeah, I think we should just take a moment and just acknowledge, your foresight there into the podcasting and storytelling. It's so powerful, and I think that it was an amazing decision for you to do the podcast, and your podcast has grown and just throughout the mountain bike community, and people love it, and it's been a fully accepted and embraced, and you're helping people live better lives, and you got incredible guests, so you're really a strong force for good, and you get to market your company. So I mean, it's a win-win-win. I would be interested to hear about any particular struggles that you encountered throughout the years. I know that you never had a strict schedule with your podcast.
No.
Can you maybe explain why that is?
Yeah, can. So I think the main struggle is putting yourself out there at first. Something that I think we spoke about briefly, and it's something that I still kind of struggle with, if I'm honest. Every episode I do, I'm already doing it now. I'm like, what an idiot. What are you talking about? This is stupid. Every single episode I think I've done, I've come away from it pretty self-deprecating. And as it's grown, I think it becomes more and more of a struggle to put stuff out, because especially with certain guests, you get a big guest on, you want to do them justice. You want to help them tell their story. You want certain insights out of it and stuff like that. And if you feel like you've done a bad job, it will play on my mind for weeks. forever, pretty much. So that's been one of the struggles. And I think maybe I'm looking at this a little bit wrong, and I'm just sort of going to freestyle this as I'm talking to you, but I've always had this sort of imposter syndrome feeling, because I've started this podcast, and, you know, by some crazy coincidence, it was, you know, the first, if not one of the first, but I'm pretty sure it was the first. And I always have this feeling of like, well, why should people listen to me? You know, why on earth would I be doing this? Like, why isn't somebody like you're established in the mountain bike community? I've just sort of come into it just on a fluke, started a podcast because I thought it would be a really good way of sort of marketing my own company. So I've always had that imposter syndrome. And I think that'll be there for forever almost, dude, if I'm honest with you. The more I think about it, the more I think that, you know, it's like, well, who am I? You know, I'm sort of not really a die-hard, I'd say, mountain biker. You know, there's people listening to this probably that have always been a massive mountain bike fan, and I'm kind of honest when I say I haven't been, and I'm not, but I am now, if that kind of makes more sense, you know, right? When I started Hook It, and one thing that I didn't say, I was talking to Zinc about a motocross grip, and then that didn't happen, so I was like, well, how about I just do the mountain bike stuff? And I've always been around mountain bikes, man. I'm not saying I'm not a mountain bike fan, because I really am. You know, I've always had bikes. I've always, you know, I've done a bunch of downhill races. I raced 4-cross. I used to have some dirt jumps. I've always been in it, but there's been certain times along this journey where, you know, you have guests and they'll refer back to stuff, and you're like, oh man, like, I don't even know what that is. Like, I feel like an idiot now. And I think that's been one of the major struggles, is overcoming that bit of imposter syndrome. And as it's grown, that's become harder and harder. And that's me being like, you know, very honest and transparent about that. But so that's been one of the major struggles.
So how do you deal with that when you got a guest and they say something that you have no idea about, and you know, something that might be well known in the mountain bike community,
I
for
wouldn't
instance,
know it. Yeah,
you
definitely.
don't know it, and then how do you deal with that self-doubt, you know, that voice inside your head just going like, you're an imposter, what are you doing, you don't deserve to be here, someone else should be able to do this way better than you, you know? How do you put that
I think you have to own it, and that's one thing that I've learned, is just be yourself. And I think there was a bunch of the first episodes where I wasn't being myself. I was trying to be what I thought listeners would want, which is an all-knowing, you know, Rob Warner-esque knowledge of mountain biking, which just isn't reality for 99% of people.
Yeah.
Or a sort of, you know, so I've learned, I think, just to own it. And if you don't know, you don't know. You can't know everything. And just be yourself. And I think that's one thing that I've learned as this whole thing's gone on. You know, one thing I always think about as well, dude, is I remember one guest in particular, and I used to do tons of research. I'd sit and research for like 2 days on guests. You know, I'd find out all the race results and, you know, all this geeky stuff. And then I'd sit and I'd have all these notes written down in front of me. And then I'd always be referring back to them. And then as I've gone along this process, I've learned that you need to just flow with it. Don't, you know, yeah, you have a few bullet point notes written down, but for the most part, it's about just having a conversation. It's not about interviewing. For me, it's not anyway. There's other podcasts out there. If you want an interview, you know, there's tons of them now. Like, they're the ones. But for me, it's about having a conversation more, sometimes not about mountain biking, not about action sports or motocross or whatever, BMX or whatever. It's about life and other things outside of that. So that's one thing that I think I've always I now think about more. And that guest, by the way, was Luca Shaw, and I've told Luca this since, but Luca was one of the first guests that I had on, and I didn't really know anything about him. You know, yeah, I was aware of him because he was, you know, a good downhill rider and stuff, but I didn't know much about Luca Shaw. So I wrote all these notes down, and after like 10 minutes of chatting, we'd gone through everything on these sheets of paper. And I was sitting there just like, fuck, now what? And that was the first time that I was like, well, just be you. Like, just sit and have a chat with the guy, you know? You got a good hour or two in you, just sit and chat shit. And that's what I did. And I think it came out okay from memory. But that's definitely been one of those things. So there's been, the more I think about it, Matt, like there's been quite a few struggles along the way. And I think there's always going to be those struggles when you put yourself out there. You know, this conversation in a way is a bit of a struggle, right? Because you're being honest and open about things that sometimes you feel like you don't have any place being honest and open about.
Totally. But
So
I think this reminds me of Aubrey Marcus, and I know you're a big fan of his, and he actually speaks about writing himself a little piece of paper, like a degree in something,
okay.
And he'll actually like to, and I might butcher this, but to my knowledge, he does a bunch of research about something, he prepares himself, and then when he gets to a certain level of knowledge, instead of like, to combat this imposter syndrome, he'll like actually write himself a certificate saying that he is qualified to do this, and then like hang it up.
Wow. Okay. That's a good idea, actually. Yeah.
Like some self-validation. You know? And just giving yourself permission to do it.
So if I can flip that question back to you, mate, what are some of the struggles you've had along the way of your journey of podcasting, and also, and I think I've asked you this before, but why did it take you so long to do that first episode?
Just for me, it was just fear of just like, what would people think of me if I was to speak, like what I really felt inside. Now, and I did it all the time with my friends, we'd have wonderful one-on-one conversations, but like, what if everyone heard that? What would they think of me? Just that fear. So like letting go of that, was a big step. And, and now that I'm in the podcasting game, I think the hardest struggle for me really is just like finding time to record the podcasts, meet the people in person, and get them out like every 2 weeks. I find that's a big struggle for me. Like, and I have a little bit of imposter syndrome too, because I'm getting to the point now where I've almost interviewed all my friends. And now it's time to go out into
I remember
the world.
That point too, mate. I remember that point. It was 10 episodes in.
Yeah.
And I'd had a bunch of friends on, totally the same as you. And then I got a direct message from Danny Hart saying, "Can I come on the podcast? I've been listening. Can I come on?" And that was like the turning point in the whole thing. It was like, wow. At the time, like the world champion downhill mountain biker has just sent me a message saying, "Can I come on your podcast?" And it was like, wow, this thing's actually a thing. It's a thing now. We're 10 episodes in or whatever it was. It might have been 8 or something. Like, it's a thing. Holy shit. I need to like step the game up a little bit. So I'm with you on that. I'm totally with you. But this is when, like, for me, the fun starts again, because you start meeting new people and you start exploring new stories that you might already not know.
And that's
why.
Do
you think?
Oh, yeah.
So go on after you.
I was gonna say, and that's why I started the podcast, to reach out to these people and hopefully befriend these people. Like I got a lot of, like I got a list of guests that I want to have on the show, and they're there's serious badasses that I completely respect, and I I can't wait to talk to them and learn from them, and that's basically what the podcast is for me. It's like a selfish growth engine,
Yeah. No, totally. Do you think having your name, Matt Macduff, well-established name in mountain biking and action sports, do you think that's often, when it comes to stuff like starting a podcast, is that a hindrance or is it an advantage? What do you think?
Oh, for me, it's a complete advantage. Like just, especially given my story and all my life experience, it's a massive advantage. Like insane advantage. Like
Okay.
like it's like putting the jet boosters on, and that's for like for two reasons. One reason because you already have fans that want to
Yep.
listen to you, so that's
Yep.
huge. You know, that's something that you probably didn't have when you started. You know,
Mate, I had one. Well,
Yeah.
two actually, mum and dad.
yeah. So you see, like that's massive because I look at it. It's kind of like an exponential relation. Like your mom and your dad share the podcast, you share the podcast. Like one of your friends listens to it that likes it, he shares it, out of 10, and then that keeps repeating and repeating and repeating, and the podcast grows organically. But it starts at 1,
Yeah.
So it
Yeah.
takes
Yeah.
a long time for it to pick up. So for me, for instance, it'll start at 1,000, and that is just like that might have taken you a year or or how many episodes. So that is a massive advantage. And then the second one is it's just having access to guests, and being
Yeah.
able to speak with them on such an honest and transparent level, like someone, and I could be completely wrong, but I think that certain people would be more inclined to speak with me just because of the stuff I've been through.
Totally. So yeah, yeah, you're right, and I think that for me that was where a lot of that imposter syndrome was quite apparent. You're shooting people, and sometimes, like, oftentimes direct messages. I've had, I've got a lot of industry friends that helped as well. A good friend of mine, Joe Bowman, who runs Steel City Media, was a massive help. When I first had this idea, I sort of hit him with it, and he was like, yeah, I can introduce you to, this guy, Martin Ashton, or, Rachel Atherton, or whoever, so that was, but again, you sort of emailing these people or sending people direct messages like, oh, hey, like, my name's Davey, I got this little podcast, it's like a mountain bike show, and just not expecting to get anything back. And I was just like super blown away by how much response I got and how open people were to doing it as well. And I think rewinding back a few years, especially maybe 3 years, it was still like really novel for people to go on a podcast. Now I think it's obviously grown a lot with shows like yours and the Vital One and Pink Bike and all this sort of stuff, but it was still a little bit of a sort of novelty to go on a podcast, I think. And I feel like that probably really helped get this thing going. Was like, oh wow, there's a podcast for mountain biking. Oh yeah, fuck yeah, I want to go on that thing and talk. And oh wow, he's had like Danny McAskill on it and Danny Hart and whatever. I think it was that's definitely what really helped this thing get going, I think.
Yeah, you know what I mean, like for me, looking at you and your podcast from the outside, I really, like, first of all, I just admire your insight into the game and just recognizing that storytelling and how powerful it is, and how there was just that missing gap in mountain biking, because there are so many incredible people in the sport, and there's so many incredible stories that people want to listen to and hear. So, like, and I think that actually you're a great person to get those stories being told, because you are a mountain biker, like you go out, you ride mountain bikes, and you represent a massive demographic in the game, and that's something that I couldn't give. For example.
I got you.
You see what
you're
what
right.
I'm
You're
saying?
right.
And that's a story that you can totally speak to a certain crowd, because of your experience and your experience in the industry, basically. You know what I mean? And as a person who loves mountain biking, that's something that, someone like me could never do, because my experience has been completely different.
Yeah, totally.
And they're both valuable.
Yeah, you're right. And I think one thing that I wanted to share with you too, something that I recently spoke about, probably for the first time, but I'll do it on here as well, is there was a time a few years ago where I wasn't riding at all, mainly because a few reasons. I became quite depressed and anxious, mainly because the business that I was trying to promote so hard wasn't doing that good, and I was working myself into the ground, man. Like, my job within Hook It is basically to be on the road visiting bike shops, and other sort of stores, and I was working myself Monday to Friday just into the ground, and it got to a point where like bikes became a stressful thing for me. If that It's really hard to explain, I think, unless someone's done this. But when your job is to be inside bike shops all day, talking to people about bikes, that when you get home, you want to switch off from it. So, but I wasn't really doing that, because you get home and you do emails and like, So I got to a point where I was kind of over it, because I didn't see it as a hobby anymore. It was a job. And that's a really, really interesting thing, I think. If you're looking at starting a business inside what is at the time a hobby, you got to be quite mindful that it's going to become a job, and it totally changes your relationship with it. And I went through that for 2 years, pretty much. Maybe a year and a half. Yeah, a year and a half, 2 years, give or take. Where this hobby that I had and this release that I used to have of like, I'm stressed, I'm, whatever, I'm just going to go for a bike ride. It got to the point where I'm stressed, I'm anxious, I'm broke, and I don't want to see a bike, because that's the thing that's making me this. So I had a very weird relationship with it for a little while. And again, I've been very transparent about that, because that gives you an even worse imposter syndrome, because you are not doing the thing that you're talking about all the time. So there was also an aspect of that where bikes are pretty expensive, and I legit could not afford to buy a bike. So I was not riding, because I had all my chips in this business, and I'd moved back home with my parents, and I was borrowing money left, right, and centre, and it became a very, very stressful thing. And I don't know if that ever came across too heavy in the podcasts that I did throughout that time, but that was a pretty interesting time of my life, mate, to be honest with you. And that's when I started discovering other things to sort my head out a little bit, whether it's meditation or the breath work that which we're going to talk about, and cold. A lot of that came from having those feelings and being a bit of a mess. So
that's beautiful, and I think so many people go through that, that type of experience when they're just, you have this hobby that you love, and you want to do it all the time. That's exactly what you want to do, and so you go into turn it into a job, and then that means your income decreases, which is a massive stress. Or can be that's a massive stress. And then the workload increases, which is a massive stress. And then, a couple years down the road, you don't want anything to do with that thing that you absolutely loved. And you need to, come to terms with that. That's a massive challenge. But, it forces you to adapt. Just like you finding, searching and finding ways to adapt and cope with the stress. Now, I would be interested in asking you how you feel now, and if mountain bikes still stress you out, or if it's something that you really come to peace with and found a balance with.
No, I've fully fallen back in love with biking. More than ever, I think, right now. And a couple of years ago, I think hang on, let me think, timeline. So 6 years ago, started the business, had a couple of years, and then 2 years of hating it, and then 2 years now of really enjoying riding again. So that's about right, I think, timeline-wise. So, I've fully fallen back in love with it, dude. Like, fully fallen back in love with it. And I think it's the case of, the stress has eased off a tiny bit. It's still there quite a lot. Anyone who runs a business will know that it's never plain sailing. It's never easy. But the stress has, sort of been taken off my shoulders a little bit. I've been very lucky to, you know, have certain brands reach out and offer to lend bikes or give bikes and stuff like that, which has been an absolute godsend. Especially for finding my love again for riding. You know, I had this, it's pretty interesting actually. So I have this series called Behind the Bike, or I had this series called Behind the Bike. And the whole premise of that was basically to get a bike off a brand and then review it. But not review the bike, it's more about reviewing all the people that help make that bike come to market. And the reason I started that whole sort of thing was because at the time I could not afford to buy myself a bike, even though, you know, you could probably get a trade deal and you can do this and do that, and if I'd, you know, asked, I might have been able to get one. But I basically built a whole podcast series so that I could then find my love again for riding, and it really worked. Like it you know, legit worked. Marin were the first company to get involved. They sent me a bike out, the Mount Vision, and at the time it was sort of summer in the UK, and I was like, right, I'm going to dedicate 2 months of my life to falling back in love with riding. And that's what I did. I just like rode as much as I could, rode with friends, and just got that vibe back for it all again. And then now I'm fully back into it, dude. I ride 3 or 4 times every week now, without question. And that's basically it. I think, you know, having that bit of stress come off, having a bit of help from a few brands, has basically made me fall back in love with it. So
Yeah,
I'm stoked.
I think that's beautiful, because it just shows you, you know, like what you have to go through to get to where you are now, you know, and now you're an even better podcast host, and you love mountain bikes even more than ever. So who could be a better person to spread the love of mountain biking?
Dude, for sure. I think it is literally just part of the journey, isn't it? You know, it's not all plain sailing. Life has its speed bumps. It has its bad moments. You know, all those things which everyone else goes through. It's the same for me, you, everybody, right? Whether you are putting out podcasts or not, whether you're a huge influencer on Instagram or whatever, you know, it's not all sunshine and rainbows out there, is it? And I think, you know, talking again about being honest and being transparent with things, and I think that's been, the podcast has been a huge thing for that, of being able to sit and talk to people and have these sort of conversations where, whether people listen or not, to be honest, it doesn't, you know, really matter, but you're learning about yourself. You know, you're speaking to inspirational people. Your podcasts have helped me find inspirational people and discover inspirational people and inspirational practices and motivational practices and optimizing practices and all that sort of stuff. I think it is just all part of the journey, isn't it?
Yeah, dude. And when I look at it holistically now, you know, like your imposter syndrome is totally false, because you're a great person to spread the love of mountain bikes. You know, because you got to, you because of all your experience, and you're an avid mountain biker, and I think it's perfect, man.
Thank you. I appreciate that, man. It's very, really kind words, and obviously coming from, it's kind of weird, but coming from someone that I respected way before this podcast and way before we met, it means a hell of a lot, man. So thank you. And I think that it's something that I don't really search for, that validation or those props. But when you get it, it's definitely, it's kind of emotional, if I'm honest with you. That,
Yeah,
you know, all this work is kind of worth it. That people do listen, and that you know, it's kind of crazy, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a beautiful thing. So I'd be interested to know. So what are these practices that you found that have been helping you cope and kind of help you found the love again? Because, you know, there you are in your story. You have a job that you hate, you quit it, and then all of a sudden you just risk it all the chips on the table to start this business with something that you love, and you love it at first, but the workload and the economic stress just, you know, just squeezes
Pound
the
you into the
love.
ground.
Yeah, pounds you into the ground. So what were some of those practices that you found that helped you kind of steer your ship back into some smooth waters, so to say?
Great question, man. Great question. think podcasts, I know we spoke about that a lot, but like podcasts have become a massive tool, and I'll stick by what I said initially, is that podcast is like going to university if you want it to be. It's like 3 hours of a good podcast can change your life, and it changed mine. So podcasts were probably the major tool because that opens up everything else. Now, if podcasts were never a thing, I'd be like one of those people who lived in the, I don't know, 40s and 50s, where there was only 2 TV channels and you only got one bit of mainstream media. You get stuck in a bubble. But podcasts have opened up so many things that it's kind of hard to think about life without that. Like I said, I'm not a very well educated guy. I left school at 16. I'm pretty stupid. One thing I'm educated in is talking to people, by having a lot of life experience, by leaving school at 16 and going and traveling, the States on my own at quite a young age. So I'm pretty good at, I've got some pretty good, life skills and stuff. But that, and then, discovering podcasts, man, have opened up things like the cold, which is something that we've spoke about a lot, but I'm pretty sure I was thinking about it today that Wim Hof, I'm pretty sure it must have been a Joe Rogan episode with Wim Hof that first turned me on to this whole cold thing, this whole movement about the benefits of being cold and breath work. So that's up there for me as I always like to think of it as like a tool belt, in that when these thoughts and feelings, whether it's depression or anxiety or just general stress, when you get these feelings come up, it's about building this toolkit that you can dip into, and you can take a tool out and you can try it and see how you feel after. And then if it didn't work, all right, another tool, get that one out, and you can work your way through everything until you find an outcome which is positive. So for me, the cold has been a massive thing, man. If I get stressed or anxious or depressed, my number one thing is to get cold, whether it's a cold bath, cold shower. Obviously that then makes you breathe better, which seems to really help with the anxiety. If that doesn't work, I then, straight away go to just being out in nature, turning off all your shit, phones, laptops, all that stuff. Being out in nature, whether that's a bike ride, whether it's a walk, a hike, a run. So that's like the second thing, if nothing else is working. And then I think the third thing would be like the diet, make sure you're eating good. Sometimes, I don't know if you experiment with this too much, but if I'm really struggling, I'll just stop eating, just fast for a little while and let your body work through some stuff, both physically and mentally. I think that's a pretty powerful tool to have in the tool belt, man, is that. And then the other one would be just I've got quite into meditation over the years. I'm not good at it. I need a stimulus to meditate. I'm not very good at just sitting, although I like the idea of sitting in a quiet room and just thinking with, a nice incense or some candles or whatever. I need either guided meditation or, some of that stuff that I sent you, like the really ambient music. There's an artist called East Forest which makes this beautiful sort of really engaging and sort of makes me feel very weird, some of that music. So I'll often just sit for half an hour with some of that music on, and I think they're my tools that I personally will dip into if any of these feelings and whatnot come up. But I think also it's not even if those feelings come up, it's just trying to make that a bit of a daily practice so that you sort of eliminating any of that before it comes up. And I'm a big believer in the fact that you're doing that helps anyway, right? Because it's kind of like the placebo effect in a way. I feel that even if it's not working on a neuroscience, whatever it is, level, the fact that you're doing it and you're telling your body that you're gonna make it better and make yourself a better, stronger, mentally, physically person is already like a massive win. How about you?
Wow, dude. I mean, so it sounds like that it was the podcasts were the root, that kind of exposed you to all these different things, these different tools for dealing with stress and anxiety and depression, and then you just started applying them and it worked for you.
Yeah, and life too, man. I mean, it gears you up for life, doesn't it?
Totally.
You look at some of the views that something like a Rogan podcast get. I mean, he's getting millions of views on YouTube. So I can't even imagine how many it's getting on, iTunes and Spotify. I mean, it's astronomical, and how powerful that is to be able to like change a culture from that. Something that he started out, man. I mean, Rogan's such an inspiration. It should be an inspiration to anyone who podcasts, but he just started that screwing around with his mates in an empty room in his house, and all of a sudden it is arguably one of the biggest media outlets on planet Earth. I mean, it's just so crazy to think that it can do that. There's one thing that I always think about, Matt, and I just want to throw it in there, which I was listening to a Tim Ferriss episode a long time ago, and he talked about what he called the Tim Ferriss kiss, which is basically he was saying that if he talks about a specific product on his podcast, it's that big that he can almost ruin a business because they'll not be able to cope with the amount of web traffic and orders that come with it. And I always found that so interesting. I remember thinking, like, I probably wasn't too far into my podcast career, thinking that's really cool. Not for the listens, not for the money, but the fact that you can influence that many people by talking into a microphone sat at a laptop is mind-blowing. Yeah. And it's free to make it.
Yeah.
So, I always think about that. It's a really, really, really interesting thing that he said. That he was basically saying too that if he's going to mention a particular product, he has to warn the company first that this episode is going out on this date at this time, and that they're going to get a shit ton of business. So, I always found that really interesting.
It is. And I mean, it's just the power of storytelling, really. We've been telling stories for thousands of years, and I think today, in today's world, you look at Instagram, and for instance, which is basically like your best of reel, like everyone's putting out their best self, and an image that that they have, and I feel like it's not a very strong way to connect because people are only seeing the good. And when you when you look at podcasting, for instance, and there could be a million reasons why it's so powerful and why Tim Ferriss gets such a high conversion rate, but I think honestly it's just because it's so authentic and so honest. And when you listen to someone speaking for an hour or 2 hours every, or sometimes even 3 hours every 2 weeks, you cannot be anyone but yourself, and
totally.
And that
you can't hide. You cannot hide at all.
And you're giving the good and the bad, and it's raw and honest, and that's what people want. Really, that's what people connect to, because we live in a world that's just full of the good, but really it's just a big mask because there's just so much bad and there's more problems than ever, and podcasting seems to be the place where people get real and talk about that shit, and that's the stuff that people don't maybe want to talk about all the time, but in their car they're going to turn on and listen to, and it's going to change their life. They're going to learn new things. They're going to apply the tools, so to say, and then they're going to live a better life, and then that's just going to reinforce the trust. So when a podcaster does promote a product, it's there's a lot of trust there, and that's why the products have to be good.
Yeah, you're right, mate. 100%. It's a very interesting thing. So just to flip this on its head, just because I'm curious with you, like, what sort of tools do you use, man? And have you had any sort of battles with stuff like anxiety and depression and stuff like that? Is it something you've already spoke about? Because I'm not entirely sure I've heard it, if you have.
Wow. I mean, what kind of battles do I have? I mean, like I'm like everyone else. I got a lot of stuff going on inside, but for me, I'm actually a pretty happy person, and I've never really had.
Sorry, just to interrupt you, but you said
Yeah.
like in that last episode that I just thoroughly enjoyed that last episode, man. That a lot of the loop stuff um was looking for validation from
Yes.
was it from your father, right? So tell me a little bit about that, man. Like I'm interested to know more about how all that materialized into this loop. And I know you did a great job on your podcast already, but for people who might not already have heard it, man, I'm just curious how that all unfolded and how you now feel about it.
Yeah. Well, it's I guess so. There's where do I even begin? Basically, like you just go your whole life, and a lot of us do. We go their whole lives just trying to fill this hole, you know? And it's just endless. It's just bottomless. And you're doing all this stuff to fill it up. And it's it's such a it's such a piece that it's such an important piece that you're missing in your life to become a whole man and become comfortable in your own skin, because that's really the mission, I think, to for most young men, is just to like, fully embrace themselves and figure their shit out so they can go from the I, to the we, to start taking care of um, people around them and being a man and providing, and just going from the I to the we. So like in that process, I was just experimenting, trying to fill this giant hole, and I found it through action sports. I found it through risking, like I'm just really good at reacting fast and thinking clearly in like high stress situations. And so I could do really dangerous things, and my friends would be like, "Oh my god, like that was amazing. You're the man." And then that just that would kind of fill me up, for a little bit. It would make me feel validated and powerful, and like I was, being a good person, or all those things. And then there was just this like massive, you just want more and more and more and more and more and more and more of it. And then that led to a career in action sports, being a professional mountain biker. And then eventually that wasn't enough, and that led to like world domination, basically, with the loop de loop. And then that was just like a small step in the plan I had. Like I was gonna be the new Evil Knievel, man, like the most famous stunt man on the face of the earth. And it was just it was a never ending. It was just never gonna end. Like even if I did get to the whole world, then it would be like, all right, the outer space, because I just couldn't fill the validation that I just really needed from my father. Like,
Okay.
and when I
Yeah.
crashed the loop, I understood it. Just like everything was taken away from me, and I still had that feeling, and I just had to really dig deep and look at where it was coming from, doing a lot of shadow work. When, for those of you who don't know what shadow work is basically like, digging into your psyche by asking yourself questions and kind of like helping you see your own shadow. And because a lot of us,
Okay.
have these feelings, these deep feelings inside that we're completely blind to, but others can see it right away, you know?
Mm, mm.
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay.
So we're going pretty deep here,
Okay.
but basically,
No, but where did you learn about that? Like where did that come from?
there's just so many. I mean, Paul Check is a big
Yeah.
is a big influence of mine, and he's a great like philosopher and psychiatrist and just a healer. You know, he healed a lot of really awesome action sport athletes like Danny Way when he broke his neck, Robbie Madison when he broke his back. He's basically the guy that you go to when no one else can fucking help you, you know. And he's done some incredible work. He's a big mentor of Aubrey Marcus, and he has got a
that's
great.
right. Yeah,
he's
they
got
did some really good podcasts together.
yeah, and he's got a great podcast called Living 4D with Paul Check. So, just like you, I was searching for something, searching for some knowledge, and finding it through podcasts, and taking those tools and applying them into my real life. And what I came to realize basically was that my quest for world domination and fame was like, it was like two things. It was like, one, it was like 50% me living my best life and truly expressing myself the way I am here to do with my gifts. And then the problem was that there was it was like getting fueled by jet fuel with this like this this validation search, you know. So it was just like it was almost like putting like the times 2 or the times 3 on your audiobook so it goes faster, you know. And it was just like this hole that I had, this love that I was looking for, just caused me to move through things too quickly, and things that I was called to do, like this loop, you know, like I still to this day I still want to do the loop, and I'm going to do it for sure, you know, whether I do it when I'm like 40 years old or I do it, you know, in like 2 years, you know, that doesn't matter, but I know that I'm going to do it. I know that part of why I'm here is to bring action sports into a new, you know, like paradigm, and that's just like something that you just feel like, it's just feeling, you know, and you have this intuitive thing that you just cannot explain. Like, I'm such a visual person, like I can just see things before they even come, you know, to existence, like in action sports. Like,
Really?
I can totally tell where the sport's going. I can totally tell what the tricks people are going to be doing in 5 years, you know. But I was just unable to do the right work because of this validation thing that I needed. You know, it was just basically causing me to do things before I was ready. Does that make sense?
Mate, it totally makes sense.
And then that was leading to
pondering.
Yeah, and then that was leading to injury, and then that's why I've been hurt so many times. So finally, when I got to the loop and like almost ended it all, that all came in at once. And you know, and I called my dad, and I hung out with him, and I told him how I felt, and you know, and it was beautiful, healing, and we have a great relationship now. And you know, as soon as you unpack that stuff, then it's like just it's like moving into a house, and you got all these boxes, and as soon as you unpack them all and figure out what you need, figure out what you don't need, get your house clean, well, then you can, you know, then you can really do anything, right?
Yeah. That's such a good story. And one thing I was pondering, you know, as I was listening to you, is how many people are living that existence, searching for that validation, and they're in a job that they don't like. You know, they're just doing stuff they don't like because they're searching for that validation, and that validation might not be from your father. It's just from your friends, the world. You know, a lot of people just searching for validation from the world by posting shit on Instagram, trying to get likes, and that to them is the validation that they need. It's like, oh, I got 50 likes on this photo of my new car.
I gotta stop you there, because it's really more deeper than that. Because like, it's like a Band-Aid, basically. Like, if you're posting stuff on Instagram, if you're looking for external validation for others, it's just it's a Band-Aid on something much, much deeper. You know, because it's really there's a part of yourself that you're not okay with. You know, so people gotta tell you it's okay. You know, or you gotta you gotta look cool. But it really it's a lot deeper. You know. And those problems run rampant, and it drives people to do incredible things. And a lot of young dudes in action sports have these complexes, man, and they just don't realize it yet. And that's part of the beauty of action sports, is it helps you figure all that shit out as you become a man.
Yeah. Wow, it's powerful, dude. Real powerful. Great observations.
It is really powerful, you know, and it's deep, and I can get way deeper into it. But I think, you know, I'm just so thankful for action sports and podcasts, because they help me figure out these tools. And I think that, like, now would be a great time to talk about some of those tools. Like, one of the reasons why I wanted to do this podcast with you is actually so we could talk about breath. Because for me, breathing has been one of those things that has completely transformed my life. And I think it's been the same for you. Am I correct?
Yeah, it has. Yeah, definitely. And it has. You know, I'm just trying to think where I can go with that. But yeah, there's a couple of different reasons, really. One would be that it actually did save my life. I mean, you could argue that, you know, every breath you take saves your life, but learning about the cold and Wim Hof, you know, it did save my life, you know, a year and a half ago, when unfortunately I fell into some really cold water on a trip with some friends. And no doubt people listening to this have heard the story a few times, but if you haven't, I was on a canoe trip with some friends, and we were going across Loch Ness in Scotland, which is, I think, like the largest expanse of water in the United Kingdom. And it's really deep, which means that the temperature never really changes. So it was somewhere between like 4 and 6 degrees, let's say. And me and my two friends, we fell in the water right in the middle of Loch Ness. Probably the worst place you could ever fall in Loch Ness is right in the centre. So it's a kilometre from each side. It's 2 kilometres wide where we fell in. And up to that point, I've been doing quite a lot of breath work, you know. I think breath work comes with cold. I think we'll both agree on that, you know, there is different aspects of breath, but a lot of what I found I was doing was, you know, doing deep, steady breaths while sat in cold water, whether it's a cold bath or in a, you know, a cold shower or whatever, you know, the odd lake here and there, but they're pretty grim where I live. You don't really want to be in and out of lakes too much, come out with all sorts of things. So me and my two friends, we fell in the water. Me and one friend, you know, we were quite into the whole Wim Hof thing. We were doing the cold exposure a little bit, and my other friend, who wasn't doing any of that, you know, he'd probably not been in cold water for really cold water like that, you know, for years. And it was really interesting of the response which kicks in. You know, we fell in the water and I instantly knew that I had to steady the breath, long deep breaths in, long deep breaths out. Whereas my other friend, the one who hadn't done any of this practice, was panicking pretty heavy. He was taking really short breaths. He was almost like asthmatic, you know, and that's when people die, because you start inhaling water. You know, you get water in your lungs, blah, 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 blah. So, you know, there's a lot more to that story. But I was in the water for about 50 minutes, which is when, you know, organs start shutting down, you go into shock, etc. But I really think that understanding the breath definitely saved my life that day. So ever since then, really, I've been an even bigger practitioner of breath work just because of that. Because I feel like I owe a lot to the practice, I think, since that day. But yeah, it's super interesting actually how that all played out. How one friend really panicked, and then two of us were like, okay, no, we know what to do in this situation. It's not going to be easy to get out of this water, but we know that if you keep breathing properly, that you're going to stop yourself from drowning, basically. Which is kind of strange to talk about it, but then off the back of that, I've been trying to do a Wim Hof, practice every day if I can. And it really does help. It really.
How long have you been practicing, by the way?
I was doing it before. I'm trying to think back, dude. Ever since Wim did that first episode on Joe Rogan, I think, and when I watched that Vice documentary he did, which is just mind blowing, dude.
Powerful.
I mean, you can't watch that and not be in awe, right? Of a guy running around in the snow, in bare feet, just sitting in ice baths. You can't not be in awe of that guy and what he can do. And we could go down a rabbit hole on some of the things he's achieved, no doubt, and some of the health benefits too of breathing. But for me, on a personal level, it just helps. It does help with anxiety and stuff. If you do feel that way, just sitting and taking breaths. You doing your 30 or 40 long. Sorry, not long, but sort of like short inhales, and then I'm trying to think now, man. I've had a bit of a mind blank how it even works, unless I'm doing it with the app.
The app is incredible.
And just turning your attention, really. The app is incredible. The fact that thing's free is mind blowing. I'm not sure if you do the paid one, but I just do the free daily practice pretty much every day.
Oh, yeah, I got the paid
so,
one.
Yeah, I'm gonna pay for it, man, because it's worth every penny, isn't it? Let's be honest.
Yeah, I bought.
So yeah, that's when I first. Go on.
I was gonna say I don't mean to cut you off. I was just gonna.
No.
I was just going for some validation there, telling everyone how much I paid for Wim Hof stuff. No, but I'm just a big fan, man, and been doing it for a while. And I bought all his books and I bought all his courses too, and it's just, dude, it's just helped so much. But please, so how it's like, finish how it's been helping you, please.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's mainly that. I'm trying to think, man. I'm trying to put it in a really nice way that I think it's very important to take that time for yourself to sit and do the breathing and not be thinking about anything else. All you should be thinking about is the breath. That is it. In and out. That is, plain as day. That is what you should be thinking about. And I think that in itself is a very powerful tool to have in your tool belt, because it means that you're going to take that, whether it's 5 minutes or 30 minutes, taking that time for yourself every day, I think is very important. We're all caught up in the rat race. We're doing this, that, and the other. You put it off. You think, I'll do it later. You never get around to it. But making yourself be disciplined and sit and do that breath work is very important. I'm actually, Matt, just quickly, with the Wim Hof, let's just say the standard Wim Hof practice of the 30 to 40 breaths and then the breath hold at the end. Mm-hmm. Have you felt any, sort of extreme, let's say, like euphoria or anything after doing that practice?
You know what? It's like at first it was pretty crazy. It's a pretty crazy feeling. There's a lot of body tingling and stuff, but I find now after years of doing it every single day, it's almost like you're just going in to yourself and you're feeling certain areas that are kind of locked up or tight, and you're able to completely release those. There's a lot more control in the process. I found when I first was doing the breathing, just things would happen and I'd be like, oh my God, my nose is numb. Like, what the fuck? Or like, oh my God, I can't feel my toes. Or like, you get the hands lock. Have you had the hands lock up?
I've had that once, where it goes into like a claw position. Yeah. And I've had that once.
And then you have a really big release, which is that's a holotropic breathing, which is like the Wim. That's what happens if you keep doing this. If the 30, 40 breaths turn into 100 or 150 breaths.
Right.
Then you get the holographic breathing, which is a great way to release. But
Yeah.
I just personally, I found that I can just go in now consciously and check everything out, and kind of doing like a systems check in the morning. You know what I mean? Like,
Okay, and so
fire up
so you
engines.
do this every morning.
Yeah. Every morning, that's
Yep.
this first thing I do is I get up. I don't even get up. I just turn off my alarm and I get right into the whim. And then sometimes I'll do the push-ups at the end of the exercises, and then get right into some meditation, and then it'll be a cold shower and exercise, and then kick ass.
Yeah. Wow, that's cool, man, that you do it in the morning, because that's something that I have I've been trying to do it. I have a little bit of a different morning routine to you. My morning is normally I wake up, throw some clothes on, and I just go outside. I got into a really good routine through lockdown, actually, of walking my dog with a friend in the morning. So we just take a 1 hour walk, nothing strenuous or anything like that. We just take a walk and have a chat. And normally, I'm in the UK, so really what you should be doing is getting some vitamin D and getting some sunlight. But here it's kind of hard sometimes. Usually we get some cloud and some rain, but it's just nice. Like, that's my first thing I do. I roll out of bed and it's boom, straight outside, whether it's rainy, cold, hot, whatever, outside.
I think it's
and then what I'll do is
beautiful.
when I get back, that's when I sit quiet and do my breathing usually. But I'm gonna try it the other way around. And I'll come back to you and let you know if that makes any difference or not. Whether waking up and doing it and then going out for the walk makes any difference. Because I always feel that after you've done that, it's a very different. You're in a very different state after you've done those breaths, and that's why I think doing it in the morning could be really powerful.
I mean, to each their own, dude. Like, there's no right way. There's no wrong way. Like, everyone's different. So take the tools and apply them in a way that certainly works for you. But it is really powerful stuff, and definitely it's completely changed my life. Like, I remember when I first discovered Wim, super long time ago. It was just like the fact that he was doing all these incredible things, like a lot of incredible things. Like when you're like, I'm gonna do something, and 100 smart people go, that's impossible. Like smart people with degrees. And then you're like, actually, it is. Check this out. And you do that like so many times. Like, I think Wim has done that like over 30 times with different stunts and things that he's proven. And you continually do that. That is an incredible skill that like, just, I don't even know like anyone else that has a skill like that. Like, just that alone is insane to learn. So like that was something, the first thing for me when I saw Wim that blew me away. And then when I started doing his techniques, the craziest thing that happened to me was my pain went away, because I had pain at the time.
Really? Was it all post loop then?
Yeah. This was fully post loop, like just post-loop. Like battling like a year. No, 9 months. 9 months after the crash, I went for my last doctor's appointment, and the doctor was like, "All right, you're good." Like, that's as good as you don't need to see me anymore. And I was like, "What do you mean I'm still completely fucked?" Like, I can't ride, nothing, Like, I get on my bike and I would roll around and have pain in my wrist and my ankle, and just full of pain, man. And then I just couldn't accept that this was it, in my healing. So then I just went out there and through the podcasts and stuff, found all this incredible information and stumbled across Wim, and then started doing his exercises. And dude, within the first week of doing his exercises, all of a sudden I went from like being able to just cruise around the parking lot to actually going to the skate park for like 30 minutes and riding.
Wow.
Yeah, and then
really, yeah, that's
and then
crazy.
continuing to do it, and within, I would say, 6 months, I was able to go to the skate park for hours without pain, and it's
Wow.
just because of the like, I was just so acidic. I just didn't have enough oxygen in my system. I wasn't breathing properly, and then just fucking slammed a whole new paradigm open of how important breath is.
Did you do some damage to your sort of chest as well and stuff? Do you think when you crashed? Do you think that's part of it too?
No. I didn't do no damage to my chest. Like I
was just curious if that was like a bit of a thing.
No, I had internal bleeding and stuff, but like, no, it's just I wasn't breathing properly, and I lived a lifestyle of high stress, which was altering my breathing, and I was breathing fast and shallow. My body wasn't getting enough oxygen. I think that most of us aren't getting enough oxygen, and a lot of people also don't know that the body gets a lot of energy from oxygen. It's a big force of power, food and oxygen, and I think that's actually why people can live off of for so long eating crap, because it just shows you, well, how much power we get from oxygen. The body's just able to like, still operate, which is remarkable. And so when I started doing the breathing and all of a sudden my pain went away, I was just like, oh my God, this is insane. How come no one in action sports is really doing this? And then I go deeper and I found out that, some guys do it. Some guys have no idea. And then you think about pain and all the pain meds, and then depression, anxiety, it's all linked to breathing.
Yeah.
Which is insane.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. It is insane, dude. It is insane. So what's really interesting too is how diligent you are and how you've stuck with that practice and how you've continued to explore. I love that, because it's so easy just to do it for a bit and then just fuck it off, right? And we've all done that in our life. You find this cool thing and you do it for a bit and then you just almost fuck it off. You're just like, oh, I don't need it anymore. But you've continued down this path, and I think that's where we're quite similar to, because I've done something similar with my life. Like, I've found this thing, and you just keep digging around and you find these people and these books and these stories and these podcasts and these practices, and you sort of find them and you're just like, how come nobody else knows about this stuff? Oh yeah, okay, this guy knows, and that'll be an interesting conversation and stuff. And it's so cool that you can worm your way around this whole, it feels like to me like underworld of knowledge that not a lot of people are tapping into.
Yeah, but we need people to tap into it, because the thing is that it changes lives. It changes the way you live. It changes how much stress you can tolerate. Nowadays we're under more stress than ever. You look at you look at kids, like they look who they're looking up to, for the most part. Like, pop culture is fucked, man. And there's like less and less good examples out there, but at the same time there's more and more because of the podcasting and stuff. So it's important for like us to speak up about this stuff and help someone, who hasn't heard about it, so they can start their path, and
definitely. And it's a great way. I think when you were saying about, you wanted to change action sports and stuff, how you were initially trying to do that through doing the loop, and no doubt, you're still doing all that rad stuff on bikes, but how it's cool now that you have this platform to engage with people and tell stories and share what you've learned. That's really interesting, right? How you've almost sort of switched in a way to now have this as, not switched, because it's not like you're just doing this, that's not what I mean, but you now have this platform which is to share cool stories and knowledge and whatnot. So
I mean, for me, for me it's this is, I can talk all I want on the podcast, but I want my video projects and my, my just the things I can do physically to be the proof, and if you're interested in how I'm doing this, then you can listen to the podcast and you can know that when you're listening to the podcast that I do live this, and that's the goal. You don't want to be a talking head. And I'm really excited. I have 2 video projects coming out, and one in particular is certainly the best riding that I've ever done to date, and it just all speaks to all the work, all the work that it just all compounds over time, like putting money in the bank, that interest accumulates, and then you're just kicking ass on such a high level. And that's what I see in all these people that Joe Rogan has on or Tim Ferriss has on, that they have been doing work for a long time. They had a big life event. They fucked up. They were at zero, and then they looked around, found the tools, applied them for years, and then that compounds over time, and then all of a sudden they get a nice opportunity, and they can capitalize on it, and their life changes forever. And then to look from the outside to be an overnight success, but really it was the years of work that led to that. And then that's also what my podcast is about, and finding that in action sports.
But that's also the gnarly thing, isn't it? Is that we're so used to such like instant gratification with your 6-minute abs and your 15-second video clips on Instagram. We just want that gratification, but the reality of it is there's this shit takes years, and unfortunately Rogan is another prime example, dude. He's been doing that podcast for years, probably over a decade, and obviously it's paid off. He just signed $100 million deal with Spotify, which if you're into money and that's the tool, he's achieved it. He got there to success, tick it off. But there's like you were saying, it's a long road, a hell of a long road, man, hell of a long road, and most of us probably never really get to that end point, right? I think that's what we were trying to say too about you're always trying to fulfill it, but sometimes you don't ever get there, and you've got to get to a point where you sort of happy with where you're at and you can be content. And that's, for me, kind of where I've got to recently, which I think's only a really sort of what would I say, it's kind of like a bit of a trip for me, because I've never felt this way like I do at the moment. It's kind of, we could get real deep on that, but I feel like my life's been a constant struggle for like 10 plus years of being broke and being up against it, and at this very moment I feel very lucky that I've kind of got a little bit of a reward out of all this stuff, and that the stress is off just a little bit. But it's taken 10 years to get to this point, and this point's still pretty shitty sometimes. But yeah, interesting observations. I'm sorry, I just riffing on you right there. Just thinking out loud.
Dude, the work never stops. Every day, if you're alive and you're breathing, you got to put in the work, and that's just it. And a lot of people think that they're working hard to become something, but like, no, dude, you're actually already that thing. What you're working hard to do is just fulfill your life's purpose, and if you don't know it, then you're working to find it, and these tools like breathing are some really, really incredible stuff that will help you realize that.
Totally. What was like the biggest couple of takeaways from this book that we both just read, which I don't know if we've actually mentioned the book in total, but it's by James Nestor. It's called Breath. And interestingly, I heard about it, so I sent you the link. You listened to it, I bought it. So we've both gone through this book recently, and I'm just curious, like, what are some of the major takeaways that you had after reading this that have really stuck with you?
Dude, way to bring it around. It's so funny that the reason why we had this whole meeting was to talk about this book, and then here we are almost 2 hours in. We haven't even spoke about the book yet. And it's kind of rough actually, because I want to speak about this book quite a bit, but I have to take my friend to the hospital in 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 10 minutes. So maybe we'll like reconvene, or I don't know. We'll figure
We
something
could do a
out.
part 2.
Yeah, maybe we'll do a part 2 when we actually talk about the book. But yeah, basically you sent me that book, and I like the second you sent it to me, I listened to the podcast with Joe Rogan, and then after I listened to the podcast, I downloaded the book, and then like 2 days later I was done the book. And then I'm just like, oh my fucking God, thank you for sending me this book. You know, I sent it to all the friends, all my friends, all the people I care about, you know, because I really feel quite strongly that this is one of the most important books as a human being that you could ever read. Yeah. Do you want to maybe introduce the book?
Yeah, I could do that. Yeah, I'll do that. Okay. So this book, well, first of all, I heard about this guy. He was on Ben Greenfield's podcast, and then and I listened to it, and you know there was some really interesting takeaways. And then I was listening to a Joe Rogan podcast, and he randomly mentioned that he had this guy James Nestor coming on the show, and I think even before I'd heard the guy on I'd heard James Nestor on the Rogan podcast. I sent you a link to the book, didn't I? And I was like, dude, you will love this. Download it. So the book's called Breath, and it's by an author called James Nestor. And that's the book that I sent to Matt. You audiobooked it. Do you use Audible or something like that?
Yeah, I basically downloaded it the second you sent it over to me.
That's cool.
What did Ben Greenfield had to say about the book?
Good question, and I can't. It's so sad, but I can't really remember. I think a lot of it was very similar to some of the stuff James went into on the Rogan podcast, obviously about the importance of breathing, and talked a little bit about some of these studies that he'd done with the Swedish guy, where they basically plugged their nose up and just mouth breathed for 10 days. So they went
Those were crazy.
Oh, it is crazy, man. So they went into some depth about that, but then I think that episode was only like an hour or so long. But then obviously when James was on the Rogan podcast, that was like a 3-hour podcast. So they went a little bit deeper on that one. But yeah, and you know, similar to you, I've been interested in breathing and or everything that sort of surrounds that, whether it's meditation or whatever. So I knew straight away that you'd love it. And what's cool is, I've got someone like you that is into this sort of thing, who I often send links and random studies and all sorts of crazy things to, right? And you're like, that's cool, man. And then you do the same back to me. It's really interesting.
Yeah, I'm so thankful, man, whenever someone fires something interesting across my desk, or I guess my phone these days. And I get so fired up. And the second you sent the book over, I was like, breath. Wow. That sounds cool. But I was like, and then maybe not too sure how soon I was going to read it, because I got a big list of books that I choose from every time it's time to read one.
Mm-hmm.
And then I listened to the Joe Rogan podcast, and like the second the podcast was over, I downloaded the book, and then the next day I had a 6-hour drive, so I crushed.
Yes.
Pretty
I
much
remember
half
now.
the book. and then a couple days later, I had another drive, and I ended up crushing the whole thing. I just loved it, man.
Yeah, really interesting book. And what was kind of a little bit frustrating was I had to wait a few weeks until it was released in the UK. So just quickly, actually, what I did in between waiting for this one to come out is I bought one of James Nestor's old books, which is called Getting High Without Drugs, I think. And for anyone who's considering buying it, just don't bother, because it's really not as good as this one. It's pretty bad, actually. It's all about different ways of getting high, but some of them are just like really ludicrous. And I ended up not finishing it because I thought, well, basically this book was ready to go and pick up from the local bookstore. So I squashed the other one down and started reading Breath. And
That's funny. That's funny. It's almost like I think he worked on Breath for a long time.
Yeah, I think so too. Yeah, I think with all the studies that they went through, I can't remember what he said. It was a good 4 or 5 years though, I think. But the other book is terrible.
That's good to know, because often you find an awesome book by an author and then you just want to consume all their material.
Yeah.
But, sometimes it takes a couple tries before the greatness comes out.
That's true. That's fair. Yeah, that's fair, dude. But yeah, this one, yeah. But this book, the Breath book, I think we sort of touched on it a little bit in part 1 of this podcast. That I think it's a life changer. I really do. I think it instills things inside of you that are gonna improve your life. I think you said yesterday that you feel that this book will probably add a good 5 to 10 years on top of anybody's life, which is a powerful thing to say. And I really, I'm with you on that, I think.
Yeah, totally. I consider it like a must read, man.
Mm.
So I wrote down a couple points which I thought were super interesting, in particular about the nose chapter, because we got into the book starts and then it goes into these really cool experiments.
Yeah.
Where he only breathes through his mouth for, I think, was it 14 days?
I think it was 14 days. Actually, it might have been 10, but it was either 10 or 14. Yeah, so him and his buddy, they had sort of silicon sort of balls, I think, put inside the nose, and then tape as well across the bottom of the nasal passage, right? So they could only breathe through the mouth.
Yeah, and they start breathing through their mouth, and all of a sudden, like they can't sleep, and they're getting stressed out, and their blood pressure's rising, and all this crazy stuff. And they relate that into how we are all breathing through our mouth, and all these crazy health problems that a lot of people are experiencing, in particular anxiety and depression and sleep apnea, I think it's called.
Yeah.
Which are all things that you deal with as a modern day human.
Definitely.
Pretty much every single person we know, well, at least I know, deals with this on some way or another. And personally, I deal with it as well, but not to the extent of those guys. And I think it's a lot because of a lot of the Wim Hof stuff, and I don't know, I digress, but then they switch to nose breathing.
Yep.
And within the first 24 hours, there's just massive change.
There's a part in it where he says actually how much difference it made to start breathing through his nose, and his sort of rate of snoring went down almost was it 500% or something like that? It was astronomical amount. He'd gone from snoring for 2 minutes a night, 2 minutes per night, to snoring 2 hours, 4 hours a night, just from breathing through the mouth. And then as soon as they took out those plugs and started breathing through the nose again, he went down 500% or something ridiculous, to getting a full night's sleep and waking up feeling energized rather than feeling exhausted. And like you said, I've probably, similar to you, got a few friends who have the same sort of problems, who wake up and you don't feel rested because you've been breathing through your mouth and snoring and stuff,
Yeah, it's crazy. So one of my best friends, who actually built the Loop of Doom, he has a clogged up nose.
And that's from, is it crashing or?
No, I don't know what it's from, but he's always just had a really hard time breathing through his nose. And he has always suffered with anxiety and always suffered with depression.
Wow.
Like really, like a lot,
Yeah.
man.
Yeah.
And it's so crazy because I was just hearing all this stuff from the book, and I was just relating it to him, and I was like, oh my God, he suffers from all of these things, and he cannot breathe through his nose. Like, is it his nose?
Yeah.
Like, I need to know, because I called him and I was like, you have to read this book,
Mm.
And same with my mom. She has, snoring and in her sleep, and then she started taping her mouth shut because she also started reading the book, and her snoring completely went away.
Really? I think just to add in there, that sounds quite aggressive, taping your mouth shut. But I think if you read the book, you'll realise that it's not about, almost zipping it up and putting a full layer of duct tape or something across your mouth. Oftentimes it can be just a really tiny strip just across your lips, just to stop your mouth from opening. Which I've not done it actually. It's something that I wanted to try, but I don't suffer with snoring or sleep apnea. So I've not tried it, but apparently even if you don't suffer, it's still a really good thing to do. Have you tried it at all?
Yes, actually,
have?
dude,
Okay.
I totally tried it. Like the second I finished that part, I started taping my mouth shut, and
And what do you use, and how do you do it?
Well, okay, I did it just like he says. I took a little piece of medical tape, maybe like only 4 centimeters, 5 centimeters long, and then just stuck it on the top of my lip to the bottom of my lip. And the first night, I found it was really difficult to fall asleep.
Right.
Because you got your mouth taped shut, and you're just like, what the heck is going on? But when I did fall asleep, I noticed that I had a really good sleep. But then I also woke up with tape in my beard, which wasn't really that nice to pull out in the morning. But then the second night, I actually slept quite well.
Right.
And then the third night, I slept well. And then the fourth night, I ended up doing some traveling. And to be honest, that threw me off rhythm, and I haven't taped my mouth shut since.
Wow. I just quickly found that percentage because I didn't want to throw out any fake facts. But after 10 days of having his nose sort of clogged up, I guess you'd call it, and breathing only through his mouth, James's snoring went up 4,820% in 10 days. So he was averaging 25 sleep apnea events throughout the evening, basically meaning 85% of the night he was pretty much choking to death, which is crazy to think. How many people listen to this have probably got a partner or themselves who have those events that it can be definitely eased just by that little simple tip of taping your mouth shut.
Yeah, totally. And the crazy thing is, I think it relates more for action sports, and especially us mountain bikers, because when we go out mountain biking, say we like experience a crash or something, then we it's like a big stress event, that crash. It can be quite dramatic, and that can stay in your system for a while.
Yeah.
And that crash alone can change your breathing rate, Yeah.
And
then if you go to sleep and you're breathing through your mouth, and then you don't sleep well, after the crash, then you're not healing, and there's just this endless cycle that you just get worse day by day by day by day by day. And then 2 or 3 weeks after that crash, you're completely falling apart. You're going for more coffee. You're agitated. Maybe you're lashing out. Like it's just crazy.
Yeah. And that's what you said earlier in the podcast too, wasn't it? How you used these techniques to heal yourself, like your own body, through breathing, and you went from not being able to ride a bike to then being able to ride a skate park in a matter of months. So super powerful stuff, man. I mean, it's almost mind blowing that we're having this conversation. Do you not think every now and again you step back and just go, wow, like that's just from breathing? Something that we do 25,000 times a day, but most people are doing it all wrong.
Yeah, totally. Well, it's not that we're doing it all wrong. It's just that we're under so much stress that we're just breathing quick and shallow, and we don't realize it because our our sympathetic nervous system is just firing on all cylinders.
Yeah.
So it's more about just being conscious of the breath and making sure you bring in the rest. Because now it's harder than ever with your phone, your friends, your financial situation, and then added on top the bike ride with the crash, and it's just like just stress on stress on stress and stress and stress and stress, just stress. Snowball.
Big time snowball, and a snowball I bet that you can probably end up on for years of your life before you have this bit of information given to you or provided to you where you can start making real change, because it's one of those things, I guess, that you just take it for granted. Your body just does it for you. It's whatever, 25,000 times a day, and you don't really in theory you wouldn't really have to give it much thought if you didn't really want to. Do you agree with that?
Yeah.
You can just go with the flow. Your body's just doing it.
Yeah, and the problem is that our bodies have never been in a world like this before. This is legit, like we are an experiment right now.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like with the cars and the internet and all this stuff, like this is all new to a body that is, 200,000 years old, I think, this version of us. But anyways, it's just crazy. And then I also like the part of the book where they start talking about the breath and how it provides fuel for the thoughts, and basically like breathing through your nose, and breathing is the most intimate way to connect with your surroundings. I think they said like millions of tiny particles, like space dust, that's been around for, I think it was 13.8 billion years.
Yeah.
And you're just breathing this stuff in every breath, and they relate it to beach sand.
Right.
Like in every breath, there's more particles that's coming in and out of your body than all the beaches on the world.
God.
Which is
crazy
like,
fact. That's so hard to wrap your head around.
Yeah, like how do you even wrap your head around that? And then they bring the nose into, things like erectile dysfunction.
Yep. Yeah.
And you're like, what? Like how? Like you know what I mean? Like nobody wants problems getting boners.
No. But they were talking too about how the sort of the what would you call it? The tissue on the inside of your nose is more similar to that of your genitals than anywhere else in your body. It has the same sort of receptors and stuff, which I thought was really interesting, because your nose is kind of tender,
Yeah, totally. And it's crazy because it's just this thing on your body that, I don't know about you, but I'm a big mouth breather. At least I was, and I still kind of am. But I find it such a pain in the ass to breathe through my nose.
Right, really, do you? Okay, what is something that you have to really be thinking about? Is that when you're exercising or just in general?
Just in general, man. And it's crazy because it's an organ. You have it for a reason,
Yeah.
And this is why you have it. This book lets you know, like, exactly why you have your nose and why you should use it and why it's so important. And then it really helps.
I think that's the beauty of this book too. It's something that, the breath, like we were saying before, it's such a simple thing. When you really boil it down, it's a pretty simple thing, I guess. Like, well, you think it's a simple thing. You do it every day. You don't really think about it. If you stop breathing for more than, a couple of minutes, you'd be dead. But this book really instills all of the science behind all this stuff and how you can, like you were saying before, you can impact if you're having blood pressure problems or anxiety or sleep problems, how the breath is just this key to unlock the door to making you such a healthier and more efficient and optimized person.
Yeah, so easy. Just close your mouth
Yeah.
and breathe through your nose.
Yeah.
And even the part where they're like, okay, the part where they're like, you lose fat. Most of the fat that leaves your body doesn't come out by sweating like we think. It actually comes out through breathing.
Okay.
That is insane.
That is insane.
You know?
Yeah, that is insane.
That is insane. Like you don't lose fat in your body by sweating. You lose it by breathing. What
that
the
is
heck,
insane.
man? That goes like even like that. Okay, like if I was, like I have a buddy right now who lives with me, and he's trying to do some lifestyle changes, and he came in the house. He's 300 pounds. He's down to 220 right now.
Wow.
And he's been here for just under 3 months. And you know, just being able to tell him that, like, hey, dude, like it's not, you know, you don't lose weight through sweating. You know, you do because it's water. You know, you actually, the fat that's in you, if you want to get rid of it, you got to breathe it out.
Yeah. So that's fascinating. It is. You know, there is one part of the book which is quite similar to what we're talking about, which I really found super interesting, which was how the different sides of your nostrils, so the right and the left, can affect different changes in the body. And that's something that I had no idea about that at all. You just expect that you're breathing through your nose, it goes through the nasal cavity, which, pretty cool, interesting fact is that, you know, all of the nasal cavity is about the same size as a billiard ball. So that's quite a lot of passage and, you know, airways and bits and bobs and lumps and bumps and filtering systems and stuff that it has to go through. But I had no idea that you could alter the state of how you feel just by simply putting, you know, an index finger or something over one side of your nose and breathing through the opposite side, which you haven't clogged up. And if it's cool, man, I thought it'd be kind of nice just to read that little passage, because I thought I'd made a little note of it, and it's only really short, but it just sort of explains it a little bit better than what I could, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think you should totally read it.
Cool. All right. So the right nostril is a gas pedal. When you're inhaling primarily through this channel, circulation speeds up, your body gets hotter, and cortisol levels, blood pressure, and heart rate all increase. This happens because breathing through the right side of the nose activates the sympathetic nervous system, the fight or flight mechanism that puts the body in a more elevated state of alertness and readiness. Breathing through the right nostril will also feed more blood to the opposite hemisphere of the brain, specifically the prefrontal cortex, which has been associated with logical decisions, language, and computing. Inhaling through the left nostril has the opposite effect. It works as a kind of brake system to the right nostril's accelerator. The left nostril is more deeply connected to the parasympathetic nervous system, the rest and relax side that lowers temperature and blood pressure, cools the body, and reduces anxiety. Left nostril breathing shifts blood flow to the opposite side of the prefrontal cortex, the right area that plays a role in creative thought, emotions, formation of mental abstractions, and negative emotions. And I just find that so interesting, that if you are feeling some sort of anxiety, and I've been, since reading this book, I've been sort of playing around with that and just putting my thumb or my index finger over the right side of my nose and just taking some real deep breaths in through the left side of your nostril. 6 breaths and you feel totally different. And
wow,
it's super powerful. And again, without finding this book and being open to learn new things, you know, I'd never have discovered that. And again, a lot of people out there will probably have these issues with anxiety and stuff like that, that a simple fix, if you are feeling an attack come on, or, you know, you get that horrible squirmy feeling in your skin, that just simply putting a finger over the right side of your nostril and closing your eyes and taking 6 deep breaths it's so simple but so effective, which is,
dude, it's crazy how it's just like a hack.
yeah, it is.
Like you can just overwrite your whole system, and I loved that part of the book. To me, it was that part just made so much sense, because sometimes I breathe better through one side of my nose than the other side.
Yeah.
You know, and I always thought that, like, oh, my nose, I got to breathe through both nostrils evenly, you know, and when I would feel one side different than the other, then I would just start breathing through my mouth, because I'm like, oh, my nose isn't working.
Right.
But actually, my nose is totally working. It's doing its job. It's naturally balancing out my rest and my fight, response.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that part of the book was so amazing. And then it takes it even like a step further, and it relates it to the moon and the stars, and how actually like moon and sun and solar cycles affect like in your nose and how you breathe, and not just you, every single human being on the planet.
You're right. Yeah, I forgot about that part, which is why this is so cool to just sit and reflect on what we've read or listened to, because I totally forgot about that part. But yeah, dude, you're totally right. That's super, super, super interesting and very, very thought-provoking and very deep at the same time.
Dude, it's crazy. And then they start going into certain mental disorders and how they related them to breathing out of one side more than the other.
Mm.
And how one doctor in particular was making patients breathe, more evenly through their nostrils and different sides, and it was actually, making their symptoms much better.
Really, right?
And it's just like, dude, like all that stuff just completely, punched me in the face and just made me realize, wow, how powerful your nose is. Like, I already knew that breath was so powerful, but then it's like, just like you have no idea. And then you read this book and you're just like, it just opens up all these, all these other doors. It's almost like, it's like horizontal knowledge.
Yeah.
Like you're like, okay, like there's breath. You start marching towards the breath. You think you figured it out, and then all of a sudden you get there, and you look over the mountain, and then there's a whole nother horizon, with like
great,
50 more mountains to climb.
Yeah, that's beautiful. That's so true. That's beautiful, man. Well put. Yeah. Wow. It's there's another part of the book which I hope you don't mind me just flipping to real quick, which I found really, really interesting, was how, as a human species, we've devolved over the last sort of few hundred years, I believe, which is a lot of what this book's about. Obviously, is nasal breathing and how we've become so bad of it, and a lot of the reasons for that is that as a species, we've devolved, and a lot of that sort of stems from our bone growth in our dental arches and sinus cavity, and that is sort of related to the diet that which we've ended up on, which is a lot more cooked foods, basically a lot of processed foods, which means we're not working our jaws and we're not exercising the dental arches and sinus cavity, so they've started to shrink. So there's a lot of this book talks about research of old skeletons and skulls, and how thousands of years ago people's sinuses were so much bigger because they're exercising these muscles. And that's really got me thinking, because I'm not entirely sure what your dietary vibe is, Matt, but me, like, I live with my girlfriend who's a vegan, so a lot of what we eat is kind of soft food. So that really hit home with me, that I'm not really exercising my jaw as much as I maybe should be. I don't eat sort of tough meat anymore or anything like that. A lot of what I eat is sort of soft vegetables and cooked vegetables and the odd bit of processed sort of soy or stuff like that. So I just wanted to throw it in there that what I've done is I researched into chewing gum, and I've bought a brand called Thalim, which is a Greek chewing gum, which is apparently quite hard and tough to chew. It's not here yet. I was hoping it'd be here so I could show you, but yeah, so I'm gonna get on that, and I've looked at a few studies and watched some YouTube videos too. I hate when people say that. I've watched some YouTube videos, but I have watched
YouTube's a great way to learn.
No, it is for sure. I've watched some YouTube videos of people talking about how their jaw alignment has totally changed from chewing this sort of gum, basically, and how they've found it easier to breathe because you start of working those muscles and you are starting to open up those cavities that are sort of left quite dormant if you're on a soft food diet. So I was curious if you had any takeaways from that side of the book too.
Oh man, that's so interesting, and I'm so glad you asked, because I got to take it back a little step further, because I read this. I hired a health coach 2 years ago, and he was super into the gut, and enzyme nutrition
Mm-hmm.
and all of these things. And I ended up reading this book that basically was like, you should only eat living things. And everything that you eat that is dead taxes your entire system because it has to basically like dead things make you dead, live things make you alive, because they have
Interesting.
electrical energy and all this stuff. And
Yeah. And would you
without
class
getting
sort
too
of plants as alive, or is that?
yes.
Okay.
So like raw, and
Yeah.
then as soon as you cook something at a certain heat, all of the enzymes would go away, and then you'd have to basically you'd eat the dead food, and your body has to create more enzymes, and enzyme the enzymes that you have in your body and the ability to make them is related to the length of your life, which is what this book was saying. So the more enzymes you are forced to create, the shorter your life will be,
Yeah.
And that was basically one of the theories. Now, so the reason why I'm talking about this is because they wanted you to eat a lot of raw food. Now, the problem with that is I had never really seen or met anyone that kicks ass all day and every day that just eats raw food,
Yeah.
Like I have met a lot of people that eat raw, and they just can't hang. They can't be out there building jumps all day
Yeah.
and then go riding after. They get low on energy. I've yet to see someone like that. But I see them online sometimes and I'm like, "Oh my goodness, that guy's doing it,"
Yeah.
But then I also realize that everyone's body is different, and the size of your what I learned something else from another guy was Paul Chek, who was talking about the size of your digestional tract basically determines how well you can absorb plant fibers or meat fibers.
Okay. Okay.
And
Interesting.
then we're getting super into the weeds now. And like for those of you at home, I am not. I don't have a degree in this stuff or anything. This is all stuff that I'm just came across and read over the years in my own personal health journey.
Yeah, probably best to add that neither do I. I don't know if anyone listening to this thinking, you must have missed the doctor off my name when you loaded up this episode, but no, I'm not a doctor either, Matt.
Yeah, totally. All I have is my personal experience, my personal journey, and you know what? My body's different than your body. So that's when I first started getting raw food, and then I kind of just took it with a bit of grain of salt, and I was like, okay, well, obviously raw foods are important. They do have enzymes in them. They're living.
And was this zero meat as well? I'm just curious.
Well, it's it's different for everyone. The health coach was telling me to eat meat.
Right. Okay. So which you cook? So it'd be cooked meat or.
Yes.
Right.
Like lightly cooked meats and basically like raw veggies.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like salads and stuff. And so what was interesting was I just never seen anyone go full raw, full veg and like have all the power, But then when as soon as you said about the way your teeth and the shaping of your jaw and the chewing, and that made me think about Ben Greenfield, who says that you should chew every bite of food you take 25 times before you put it in your mouth. And that's for two reasons. For one, because it's easier to digest because you've gotten it into your system. And then second, it exercises your teeth, which now opens up your nasal cavities and all that other stuff. So like, as I kind of go deeper and deeper down the hole, you can kind of see like all these things being connected, and from my personal experience, like I don't eat fully raw because I've never seen anyone eating fully raw that that kicks a lot of ass. So I just kind of, just try to eat as much raw as possible, but still, I want to eat some cooked food too. Like, so maybe like a Buddha bowl would be a perfect example with some quinoa, maybe a bit of some nice chicken or some veggie sausage, and then you just incorporate maybe some raw beets, raw tomatoes, and raw carrots, and then you just shred them up so they're easier to eat.
Yeah.
That's my take, and that seems to work really well, I think, for everyone that I've seen eat that way.
Definitely. So have you considered, how much you chew in, and maybe working in something that's going to really work your jaw out a little bit more?
Yeah, definitely. Like now, ever since I read this book, it kind of respawned that whole thing. And, for reaching for snacks, for instance, now I'll go for like a carrot and I won't cut it up. I'll just wash it and eat it, or a hard apple, or try to stay away from the banana.
Yeah.
And just munch on things that are a little harder. Like one thing I did was I replaced chips with green snow peas.
Oh, nice. Cool.
They kind of taste the same, but
yeah, I
they're a
like
little
making
harder,
kale chips and stuff. They can be really good with some paprika or some turmeric or something, and some salt. Oof, can't beat it. And what I think was really interesting when we're talking about the jaw and stuff was how a lot of this book actually focused on sort of orthodontics, which is something that I've never really even considered. But a lot of what they were talking about within this book was that basically our jaws and mouths have shrunk, which means that we don't have room for all the teeth. So that's why we invented removing teeth. That is the whole reason. It's because we've devolved. Our jaws have shrunk, our heads are smaller, our sinus cavities have shrunk. So then these teeth grow and there's nowhere for them to go. So they started taking them out. And I'm probably the same as a lot of people listening. I had 6 teeth out, I think, when I was younger. I'm now petrified of the dentist because of it. And it's really interesting to think that that's the reason, is because as a species we've devolved, and now we just have to have them taken out because it's the only thing we can do. It's really crazy.
It's so crazy, and it's so cool to know the answer.
Yes,
it's so cool to live in this time where we're figuring all this stuff out, or at least seem to be. Like, who knows, maybe in 20 years we'll figure out that we didn't know shit and we're all wrong. But the teeth thing is so nuts because they're pulling people's teeth out left, right, and center and giving braces and all this stuff. But when they were looking at the skulls of our ancestors, they all had perfect
teeth. Yeah, perfect teeth, perfect jawlines. So crazy, huh? So crazy.
Yeah. And then they're talking about some of the natives when they were taking over the United States, and they encountered some of the native tribes, and they'd never seen guys so strong and powerful. And some of the cultures wouldn't even speak. They were afraid to speak to each other just because of opening their mouth.
Really? Yeah. Wow.
Losing that energy, through their mouth. It's just like, man, that's crazy to me.
Yeah. God, it's there was something like a really small bit of text that I read a very, very long time ago when I was super young, which was, and no doubt everyone's heard it, which is, you are what you eat. And it's so interesting to think about that now, and I've always thought this, like, you literally are, from the food you eat to the water you drink and to the air you ingest. That is literally you. Every cell, every atom is what it is. And that's such an interesting thing. I think when you sat there at a table and you're going to put this junk food in your body, or you're sat on a road on a motorway and you're ingesting all these horrible chemicals coming out the back of cars, and that is going to make up you. That is going to be your body for a long time. And I think that's crazy interesting.
Yeah, and I think it goes even deeper, to like, what are you putting in your brain? Who are you hanging out with?
Yeah.
Just like people think that, oh, you are what you eat just with your food. But no, dude, it's the entire thing. It's the friends you hang out with, the relationships you have. You know, what are you feeding all that stuff? What are you feeding your brain? Because it all makes you.
Yeah, totally.
But yeah,
So
you should
crazy.
totally read this book.
Totally. Hey, there was another little bit that I wanted to throw in there, which I found was super interesting, was the dude who's featured called Swami Rama. And I've done a tiny little bit more research into this guy just because I found him so interesting. And I think anyone who's listening should, if you're going to read the book, obviously do that. But for sure, check out this guy called Swami Rama, who in essence was a yoga teacher. He was a yoga guru who basically came to the West and started teaching yoga practices and sort of became a bit of a superstar. And that's a lot of where Wim Hof gets his teachings from. A lot of it seems to stem from this guy, Swami Rama, who had this ability to be able to control how hot different fingers were on each hand, which I think is mind-blowing, and all from the breath. So he's one of those guys, some people may have seen the Buddhist monks who can sit in snow and they'll melt the snow around them because they've made their body so hot through the power of breath. And I realise as you're saying that, you know, you're going, fuck off. There's no way. But there's evidence of it. Like, you can see it. It's there. People can do that. And this guy, Swami Rama, seems like such an interesting guy. How he, you know, came over to the West and started teaching these practices. And a lot of... he basically spent like 30 years, I think, living in caves, just meditating and breathing until he got this amazing ability to be able to control different parts of his body and how hot they felt and how cold they went. And that, again, I think that's where Wim Hof learned quite a lot of his practices. I don't know if you know much about that guy or if you can maybe add to that, Matt, but I didn't know if you had gone down that rabbit hole a little bit.
No, I hadn't jumped down the rabbit hole, but okay. I did love that part of the book, and I loved how they were talking about traditional yoga practices and how it's changed to modern ones, and how modern yoga is more like an exercise and a flow, and old school ancient yoga is more or less just like holding poses, which reminded me of Aldoa, which is this new form. It's kind of like yoga postures where you just hold poses for a super long time. And I was like, and it's so healing and so amazing. And I was just like, oh my goodness, like ancient yoga knowledge just coming back at you, like healing, saving the world, you know? And then, I mean, with this guy and the, you know, sitting in the snow and melting all the snow around him, and all the power he has over his own body is just so remarkable, man. And I totally believe it, and I totally know it's true. Like, me personally, I have been able to do the heating breathing that he's talking about.
Really?
Yeah. I've done it probably about 4 times.
Wow. And what's the practice look like?
Well, it's based, you know, it's really similar to the Wim Hof, you know, the breathing, and it's a lot of force and pressure in your belly, you know, and you can basically control the blood and send it out. But you know, I'll just put a disclaimer out there that I have actually passed out a couple times.
Oh, wow. Good work.
and I found that there's a super thin line between accessing this state, this like heated, you know, where you can generate heat with your body, and passing out. And I have generated heat with my body, and I have passed out.
That's good though, man. That is amazing, because you know, all this stuff that you're learning and figuring out, you've got to get in there and give it a go. And I'm a firm believer in that. It's all right understanding it and being able to, you know, talk about it a little bit like we are right now, but it's good to have had those experiences. And for me, this book has instilled that message inside of me that I want to go deeper down this hole. I want to try those things, you know. And I think when it comes to meditation and breath work, it's very easy to not do it. And I love that when we spoke, I don't know how we're editing this, but yesterday, when you were talking about how you get it done in the morning, I think that's super important, and it's something that I'm going to try, because the day can easily get away from you, and you go, oh, I'll make sure I make half an hour's time later to meditate, but then the next thing you know you've got caught up in emails, and you've got caught up in traffic or whatever it could be getting home, and you don't get to do it. And I think that's super important, that you learn this stuff, but then you also put together some notes and maybe a to-do list, and like, right, okay, I've learned that, and okay, I want to try this breathing exercise, and I want to try it for 10 times and then see what the results are. So yeah, I think that's for me, that's what this book's done as well. It's okay, it's amazing to learn, and listen to these stories and learn more of the background of the breath and how it can impact your life, but it's also reinstilling that message of, I need to work on this harder. Like you were saying about going over the brow of the hill, and you're like, okay, there's more, we can keep going. And definitely not getting content that doing 40 Wim Hof breaths and 3 rounds a day is enough, because it's good, it's great, it's better than nothing, but there's so much more out there, and different levels of this and consciousness that we can experience too.
Totally, man. And like Aubrey Marcus, you got to own those mornings, dude, and because the chaos of the afternoon, you never know what's going to happen. So own your mornings, cherish your mornings, because that's when you can get the work done that's going to set the tone for the rest of the day. And I have a really funny story, actually, that you reminded me about that. What's the last time that I passed out trying to do this heating technique?
Okay.
And I was at the river where I go and do my cold exposure, right? And I was with this one of my friends, and I had just finished the 10-week Wim Hof program, and in the end of it, he shows you this technique,
Okay.
So I'd done it about 3 times. I heated myself up, and I thought it was nuts, because I was in my basement, and it's pretty cold there, and I was in my underwear just sweating profusely.
Really? Wow.
And I was like, oh my God, like, I am the master of my body. This is insane.
It's enlightenment. You've made it.
Yeah. So here I am feeling like the king, and I'm down at this river spot, and I'm telling my friend about how I can do this. And he's like, no fucking way, let's see it. And I'm like, okay, well, it's pretty easy, check this out. I'll do a demonstration, and then you can give it a try, So I'm doing the demonstration, and then I just like am being woken up all of a sudden by him, and I'm like looking up at the sky, and he's like yelling my name. He's like, Matt, like, like, wake up. And what happened was I was like, oh, yeah, you want to learn this technique? Check this out. And I basically passed out in the grass.
Full gas.
And he was like, you know what? I don't think I want to do that. And
again, though, that's a great disclaimer that, it's easy to get into this sort of stuff and, be throwing yourself in cold rivers or doing these things on your own and stuff. And I think that is quite an important thing, that if you are going to try these new practices, to maybe make sure that you have someone around with you, especially when it comes to the cold, because, that stuff can be gnarly, man. I know we've not really gone too deep into the cold today, but the cold that'll get you. If you a couple of slip-ups in there and a breath at the wrong time, and you inhale something, then that'll bite you pretty bad, won't it?
Yeah, totally. And for me, it like the cold is a mirror. Like you do all these breathing, you do all this work, and you're basically like getting control of your parasympathetic and your sympathetic nervous system. And then as soon as you go into the cold, which is a strong force, it's a perfect test to show yourself how in control or how uncontrol, how much control you don't have. And then there's a whole bunch of other things that go into play, like, your whole life you've been told, make sure you get your coat on, don't go outside in the cold, you're gonna die if you do. So, I personally found that a big part of cold exposure is facing death, basically. Like this huge thing inside of me is just like, get out of the cold, you're gonna die. You're not, you know what I mean? You don't want to die. And so it's almost like this physical response that you have to control, but then there's also a mental side of it. And yeah, it's a beautiful mirror. It's like waking up in the morning and looking in the mirror, and you get to see your body, and you're like, do I have bags under my eyes? How's my posture? Do I have a beer belly? When you get into the cold, it's the same thing. You get into the cold, you sit down, and you're like, all right, how much control do I really have? Can I open up blood flow to my fingers?
Yeah.
What about my toes? How can I feel my body shutting off blood flow to my extremities to keep my core warm? All these things that as you practice it just become more clear. And just like you said, you got to be careful. You got to do it with your friends, because it's a total exploration of yourself, getting to know yourself, and it's easy to go too far.
Yeah, it is totally. Yeah, and the same when we were talking about like me having that near death experience, to be able to feel that and understand it was very important, I think, because if I'd not understood a little bit about what the body feels like when it's been cold for a few minutes, I'd have panicked way more too. I understood that, okay, my feet are gonna go numb, my hands are gonna go numb, then I'm going to get cramp. And I kind of knew all about it. I mean, it got a little bit gnarlier than that after like 45 minutes where I started, blacking out and stuff. But for the most part, like, I understood it and could control it to the best of my ability. So yeah, man, beautifully. You put that so well as well. Really eloquent, which is definitely one of your strong points. I just sort of scatter around the subject a little bit until something comes out.
Well, dude, this has been the last 4 years of my life. I've been exploring this stuff and reading about it, and it's just so awesome to talk about it with a good buddy who's kind of exploring it and on the same level, man. So, what do you think our next book should be?
I love it. I think, well, I chose this one, so I think it's only fair that we hand it over to you for you to choose a book. And we get some of the listeners involved, grab the book yourselves, let's go on a journey, and then let's sit and talk about it. Maybe we can, at some point, see how this thing goes, but we can start throwing it out to some listener questions and get people to talk about their experiences and stuff. But yeah, man, I the way I look at it, I chose this book. So I'd love to hear from you, like, something that you think is a must read, and then we can do this again.
Okay, sweet. Well, I'm gonna look into my library there and pull out a couple nominations.
Okay.
I'm thinking, right off the top of my head, I'm thinking about Mind Hacking.
Okay.
Would be a great book.
Yep. Okay, let's do it.
Have you read that one?
I haven't. No, I haven't read it. So great opportunity to read it, and for yourself maybe to reread it, and everyone out there to read it.
Yes, and if you have read Mind Hacking and you love it, or you think it's a terrible book, please let us know, and we'll pick another one.
Yeah, I think we should. I think we should do it, man. I think we should just go down. We should do this again because it's so fun. Just like you were saying before, just sit and chat, talk about experiences. We've had a pretty deep conversation. I can't really remember. I was saying before we started recording today that it left me in a bit of a headspin yesterday. And I think it's a good thing. That's the beauty of podcasting, is just to sit and be very open and transparent. And I feel like that's what people really resonate towards. And hopefully we can unearth some things and help some people. Who knows?
Yes, and just learn through our own experiences. And I would love to hear any of our listeners' experiences with breath work, and if they've had similar experiences or bad experiences, and because it seems to me the more people that get turned on to it and actually give this stuff the time of the day, and keep it up, within a year or 2 years of practicing, their life has completely, did a 360 and then some.
Just add to a little bit of a funny story with the breath. I remember when I was first getting into this, I didn't have my house, which I've lived here for nearly 4 years. I was still living at my parents, so it must have been over 4 years ago. I learned, the first little bits about the Wim Hof method and the sort of, for anyone who's never done that, it's basically an inhale and an exhale, isn't it, Matt? I mean, that's pretty much how it goes. And then there's a breath hold at the end. So I'm learning about it and trying it and whatever, and went over to my girlfriend's house and I said to her, look, do you want to try this breath work with me? She's like, yeah, I'm open to it. I'll give it a go. So she sits on the bed, cross-legged, fingers on, palms on knees. And I'm going through it with her. I'm like, okay, breathe in, breathe out. Fast forward about maybe 1.5 rounds and she had a full-blown asthma attack. And wow. I didn't even know she had asthma, to be honest. So it was so scary because she didn't have any inhalers because she'd never really had an asthma attack before. So I'm frantically looking around the bedroom trying to find like a paper bag she can breathe into or whatever. But yeah, that's, again, add that little disclaimer. If you're going to try any of this stuff, just make sure someone's around with you because it can definitely have an effect, positive and also negative at times.
Yeah, that's a terrible story, and that good for you that you were there and you're like, hey, you want to try this technique? It's going to be so nice.
Yeah, I know, it's going to be so relaxing. Next thing is coughing on the bedroom floor.
That's a big backfire.
Yeah.
Now, I think before we go, I just wanted to say something because your story has just reminded me of a part of the book that completely blew my mind. Another part of the book that blew my mind, which was the oxygen deprivation, so the increase of carbon dioxide and performance enhancement.
Yes. Okay. Yeah, for sure.
That was completely mind-blowing. Yeah. Basically, peak athletes, certain athletes were, ones that are super intuitive into themselves, started experimenting with lack of oxygen. So more increasing the carbon dioxide inside their body. And this led to 15, 20% intervals in performance increases. So, and healing as well, speeded healing and all this stuff. And I was just like, oh my goodness, that is something that I am going to experiment with for sure. So I'm going to need a couple months, but I'll probably be doing a podcast about that stuff.
Amazing. In fact, can I just ask you real quick? We talked about, your transition as an athlete and stuff as well, and, your different approach to it now and whatnot. So if you were to go and do, you've got a big trick or a stunt lined up, do you think you'd be a lot more focused now on the meditative side of it and the breath? And how would it look, from, let's say, 10 years ago? Okay, all right, let me just try and rephrase that. Let's say 10 years ago you were going to try the loop. What would your approach look like then towards what your approach would look like now? And I mean like the breathing and the meditation side of it more than anything.
Yeah, I mean, 10 years ago it was just an idea, and I mean, the 10 years ago me has no chance. But if he was in front of the loop, he'd probably, check it out for a week or two, and just get real comfortable with it, and then probably just roll the dice and go for it.
Right.
But now I think it's just experience, man. Like I look at action sports and peak performance is basically like two lines on a graph. You have like your physical ability, and then you have your experience and your I'll call it man brain, basically, like all your experience and your cultivated wisdom. And as you get older, that increases. And as you get older, also your fitness starts to decrease at a certain point. So I see my peak as an intersection of those two lines.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And now I am much closer to my peak than back then. You know? So now, with all the experience, you know, with the added strength and stuff, I think now, you know, you just use that wisdom and all that experience, and you realize that, like, you know, that it's going to be a long process. It's going to be a lot of work, and you're just okay with that. And you just, every day you wake up and you put in the work, and you just wait for the opportunity to present itself. And when it's there, you're fully ready, you know, for it, as opposed to 10 years before, you're just like totally not ready for the opportunity, but you're trying to force it into existence every fucking day.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So I think that is really the main difference, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, it does. It does. And are you aware of many action sports athletes, especially maybe the ones a little bit closer to you that maybe you live with or you ride with a lot, that are starting to implement things like breath work into their, you know, getting ready for comps? I know it's a bit of a strange time right now because we don't really have anything like that, but are you aware of anything like that?
Yeah, I mean, every athlete has his own cocktail, you know, because every athlete's different. So they all got their own tools. And, you know, certainly visualization is a big one for a lot of the guys.
Yeah.
I would say that kind of connects across the board. Breath work is kind of like a last result, like a last resort for, I would say, like high stress and anxiety moments. I only see them pull out breath work, like, you know, as a last result. But I know that the guys, you know, a lot of the guys implement visualization, and that was some form of meditation. And then, you know, a lot of the guys are hitting the gym.
Yeah.
But I don't see the breath work too much.
Okay.
Which definitely is a huge, you know,
I know, like, if I was a top flight slopestyle or downhill athlete, there's not many guys that I'd want by my side, if that makes sense. You know, you're definitely number one, I reckon. If I was going to have anyone there, it'd be like, yeah, I want Macduff around just to help me through this situation.
Oh, thanks, dude. And you know what? I love it, man. Like, for working with Brett, for instance, over the last 3 years, you know, like when I moved into Brett's house, you know, the season before wasn't a good season necessarily for Brett. You know, he was coming out of a knee injury, and, you know, he was going through a lot of tough things. But, you know, we implemented a lot of this stuff and started, you know, training super hard. And, I mean, look at the results. You know, he like first or second, you know, for the last like 2 years. It's insane. And that goes with a lot of the work, you know, that he puts in. And, you know, and it goes both ways, you know, like I'll help him train and stuff, and we're just both learning off of each other, and it's a beautiful thing. And even being there for Tom a little bit more, and basically, you know, anybody really who's you know, there's no problem helping people out as long as when the time comes, they're going to pull the trigger, you know, because there's nothing worse than putting in the work and then them backing down, you know, at the last moment. And that's why it's been so cool to work with Brett, because Brett just, like, when the moment's there, like, he's going to die before he backs down.
Yeah.
you know what I mean?
All in.
Like, dude, like, and working with someone like that, dude, and being friends, you know, being best friends with someone like that is just insane.
Yeah, I bet it's an amazing environment to be around every day, for sure. You're very lucky. It's cool, man.
Yeah.
Real cool.
Yeah. Super lucky, and it's cool that you said that, man. That makes I feel full of air. I feel puffed up now.
Good.
Like,
Good.
Oh, hell, you should see my head. It's about twice the size.
Mate, I want to thank you as well, just for doing this. Whichever way this goes, you know, thank you for having me on your show, and thank you for coming back on mine. Really, it's a cool idea. I think this is a really cool premise, sitting and talking about books and sharing some intimate stuff and going a little bit deeper than normal on these things. You know, I think it's a really, really cool concept. It could be an amazing little project.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to it, and I'm so happy to sit down and have these conversations with you. And I'm just feel so lucky that people want to listen, and I just want to get them as involved as possible so we can all learn and grow together and just become better people, live better lives.
There's nothing wrong with that.
No. All right, man. Thank you.
No, thank you. All right. Peace. Alrighty, ladies and gentlemen, thank you once again for listening to this podcast, and I really hope you guys enjoyed it. Just to clarify a few things, the book that Matt and I just read is called Breath by James Nestor, and the book we are both going to read next is Mind Hacking by Sir John Hargrave. I've already downloaded it from Audible. It's available everywhere, from Amazon, Waterstones, anywhere you can find this book. I'd love to hear you guys' feedback. Did you enjoy this episode? Do you think it's a cool premise that you guys can get involved in? And speaking of that, there's a few ways, if you have enjoyed listening to this episode, where you can really help this podcast. I know a bunch of you do this already, but a few ways you can help. Number one, share the episode with your friends. There's loads of ways you can do it. You can share it on Facebook. You can do an Instagram story, tag Matt and I and everything, so we can reshare it. If you can share it on YouTube, all that sort of stuff. Anything you can do like that really helps this podcast grow. You can leave a review on iTunes too, which is massive. A 5-star review goes a long way, and if you can write a comment about how you have enjoyed listening to this podcast, something you've learned, something you've taken away, a story that's made you laugh, anything like that, that also really, really helps. But the third and biggest thing is just keep listening, guys. Thank you so much for your continued support. If it wasn't for you guys, I wouldn't be here sat doing this. I wouldn't be able to have these conversations with amazing people like Matt and all the ones that are in the pipeline that are going to be dropped soon too. So big up yourselves. Thank you. Don't forget to share. Don't forget to drop us a follow, Matt Macduff on Instagram, and also the podcast too, at the Hook It Podcast. Have a great week, people, and enjoy. One love.